I was born 87 years ago. For 65 years, I've ruled as Tamriel's emperor. But for all these years, I have never been the ruler of my... I got it, Microsoft Edge. Thank you. I have seen the gates of Oblivion, beyond which no waking eye may see. Behold, in darkness a doom sweeps the land. This is the 27th of the last seed, the year of Akatosh 433. These are the closing days of the third era and the final hours of my life. That is the beginning of Oblivion. Oh, where do I even want to start with this? So, to give you some backstory, I want to try and get in a little faster this time because I don't know what it is about me, but if you know anything about my videos, they take forever to actually get into. So, I'm going to try and go fast and actually, get you what you want sooner. So, I saved up for an Xbox 360. That was the first console that I purchased with my own money. And I actually think it may be the only console I have purchased with my own money because the PlayStation 4, which I have, was given to me by my brother-in-law, and I have not purchased an Xbox Series X or a PlayStation 5. That's not true. I purchased a PlayStation 3. Okay, yeah, this is not true at all. So I also purchased a PlayStation 2 Slim. So I have purchased consoles, but I will say that those were... I purchased a PlayStation 3 when the PlayStation 4 came out. So long time ago, and well after the majority of the runtime of the PlayStation 3, which was a contentious console to say the least. So I saved it for an Xbox 360. I purchased it. I got the Red Ring of Death pretty much 6 months to 15 months in. It was not long. It was very frustrating. I knew, I'd heard about it. There was a place that you could go to where I lived where you could play Xbox 360 games online, because that was back when the concept of broadband internet in 2005, 2006 was still an expensive thing to pay money for. And so I don't think my family got broadband internet for a long time. I was playing RuneScape on dial-up internet, so that gives you an idea of the time period. So I saved up for an Xbox 360, and the first game I bought it that day, was The Elder Scrolls Oblivion. I had seen a friend of mine play it, and I realized that I had to get it, and I was working at a hardware store at the time for $5.15 an hour, so this was not a small purchase. This is a lot riding on Oblivion. And compared to my childlike wonder of Morrowind, I have to say, coming right out of the gate, before we get into this video, that I just didn't like Oblivion as much. I thought it was bizarre. It felt like a body that had grown awkwardly in so many places. Like, you see a person and somehow like their proportions are all off. It was like that with Oblivion, where it seemed as though they emphasized pretty much every single thing that I didn't want in a follow-up to Morrowind. And I didn't really have the language to communicate that at the time. It was just a feeling. Like, I didn't put as many hours into Oblivion as I did Morrowind. And to be honest, in thinking about the run-up to this video, I don't even know if I beat the main quest. I do remember there was a big battle, and I do remember fighting in it, but I don't remember the outcome of it. I don't remember why. One thing I will say that I was amazed by was the physics system. So in the beginning of the game, there are a lot of showcases of the physics system with chains hanging down from the ceiling, and early on you can shoot a bow with an arrow into a bucket, and the bucket responded in a physics way. And I've heard that Todd Howard has said that Starfield is going to be a tech upgrade almost bigger than the kind that we've seen from Morrowind to Oblivion. And I think I was pretty wowed by the upgrades to the engine, the creation engine from Morrowind to Oblivion. Just the way the physics felt, the way that things were a little bit more embodied. But I will say that I think it wasn't enough. It was not enough to create that sense of being in a world that Morrowind did so well. And so just know going into it that I'm going to be pretty skeptical. Also know that there's a diminishing return of how much I remember about these games. So Morrowind's pretty fresh in my mind because I've been playing it off and on this summer. that is not the case for Oblivion. One of the reasons why I want to read through these guides is because for some of these, I don't want to play the game. I just don't want to open that package. I've got other things that I want to do. I've got books I want to read. I've got ideas that I want to think about, and movies I want to watch. Like, just a lot of other stuff that I'd like to do in the summer. And so I would rather get my Oblivion experience from the guide rather than Morrowind. So to sum up how I feel about Oblivion, I made an excellent visual on Paint. Took me about 7 seconds. So I hope this is good as a qualification for how I feel. So here's what I think most technology is like. So let's think about screens, right? Let's think about CRT televisions to LED or LCD screens. So at the beginning, you can kind of see that there's quite a lot of technological growth, but then once a new invention comes out, the prototype invention kind of lingers for a while underneath the idea of what a CRT television can do. The resolution may be better, but it sacrifices contrast, it sacrifices frame rate, or latency. So a lot of those interesting ideas that CRT televisions have still linger on. When we think of like lamp projection for projectors, there are still cases to be made as far as like getting those deep contrasts like you want. But for most of the world, they linger on, or they move on to LCD screens, to plasma screens, to OLED. And eventually, given enough time, the benefits outweigh the costs of staying in the past. So probably one of the tricks of being a consumer is knowing when this threshold overtakes the old threshold. So why do I bring all that up? Well, I think Morrowind is somewhere here, right? As like in the time period, if we wanted to say this is time, let's say this is 2002. In that time period of 2002, this was probably the best that Elder Scrolls could have been given the available technology, especially when I played it on a console. It was the 3D polygonal effects, the amount of text that you could put, using a disc instead of a cartridge, the way PCs had come around to gaming with hardware accelerated graphics and normal mapping, bump mapping. I'm actually not sure when. I don't know much about the trajectory of or the timelines of these graphics technologies, but Morrowind I feel like did quite well in its time period. So that is not how I feel about Oblivion. I feel like Oblivion is like here, right? So this is 2005, and Oblivion wanted to have a physics system, and it wanted to have fast travel from anywhere at any time, and it wanted to have full voice acting. And I think that those choices, so as to make what they considered to be a more immersive experience, I think some things turned out better than others, but I missed the old days of Morrowind. Now, I will say that I think there are limitations to the way I feel about this topic, in the sense that, you could make the case that these ideas that Elder Scrolls and that Fallout and Bethesda games in general have wanted to do have slowly built up into the possibilities being quite amazing with Starfield. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I think in 2023, look at me trying to draw Starfield. I could just type it with a text box. The text box is right here, but I thought it would be a lot more memorable in your mind if you saw it awkwardly handwritten. So here's Starfield, and it's 2023, and there's no limit, no real conceivable limit to a couple things. So one of the things has to do with quick loading SSDs to the point where you can conceive of whole planets, right? So there's a technological breakthrough there that the consoles take advantage of, but that also next gen or current gen PCs just have available to purchase for fairly cheap. I think there are different tiers, of course, of hard drives, NVMe drives being, sort of the tippy top, how quickly it can load something in. They recommend nowadays that you have your games put on some kind of NVMe or SATA drive at the very least, some kind of solid state drive. So I think that has been a big one for Starfield for loading assets in. And then just hard drive space in general. Back in the Oblivion days, you could only have so much on that disk, which means that voice acting, while a cool front-facing tactic, had a real big problem with how much voice acting you can have. So we talked before about the number of NPCs. Cyrodiil feels quite empty of people, and in contrast, Morrowind feels very crowded. A lot of its cities have guards and NPCs everywhere, and they could afford that. Oblivion wanted to have NPC characters with daily schedules, where they can go from place to place, and you'll see that in the guide. It'll remark on where characters are at any given moment, not necessarily being a concrete. It could be an ambiguous experience or abstract, right? They could be here, they could be there. So you're going to see that going in. So Starfield, graphically, SSDs, we could be seeing the culmination, like a lot of video game companies, between like Elden Ring, Tears of the Kingdom. There are a lot of companies that have created culminating works of what they have been doing over the past 20 years. And maybe Starfield would be the same way. The amount of lines that they've talked about of dialogue that are in Starfield is way more than Skyrim. And you have to keep in mind that Skyrim 2 was a game that was on a disc. It fit on one disc for the Xbox 360 in the same way that Oblivion did. So how they managed to eke out as much as they could, now it seems like they are under no limits, or not under the limits that they've previously had. So that is my overall idea of where Oblivion stands in the trajectory of technology. And I think Oblivion really suffered for it. I think the reach exceeded their grasp on this one. So will that be the case in its narrative? I don't know, because to be honest, it could be a fairly great story in there. I know so little about it, so we should probably get into it before I bore you to tears. One thing I will say is that the quality of the guide as it stands for our reading is like leaps and bounds better, right? We got full color, we've got better contrast, and we have a sense of style. So this is going to be great. Like we're really in the 21st century now. Like we were just a little bit in with Morrowind, but anyway. All right, let's get you what you came here to see. The Oblivion guide. Oh, Freudian slip. Let's begin. Well, here you are, a prisoner about to be set free. You owe your freedom to Tamriel's emperor, even as the emperor is losing his own. One last time, Uriel Septim VII has peered into the dark well of destiny and found a stranger staring back at him. And that stranger's future is inextricably bound up with the future of a nation. You're an ordinary person who, whether through the alignment of the stars, as the emperor suggests, or simple dumb luck, is standing at a crossroads in history, where great forces converge and push an ordinary person to great deeds. And who's to say that your ordinary person won't need a little help? The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion finds you traveling, within the Tamrielic Empire's imperial province, otherwise known as Cyrodiil, named for a dynasty that included 3 early emperors. It's a great green dogleg that stretches from Anvil on the Abyssian Sea, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, in the west, to Cheydinhal in the long shadow of the Vallis Mountains in the east, and south down the Neben waterway to Leowyn and Topol Bay. Roughly at its center, on an island in Lake Remer, is the Imperial City, a stone wheel of a city built around the towering Imperial Palace. Now, trouble has been no stranger to the reign of this emperor, and it is hardly surprising that it should end with trouble as well. In Arena and Daggerfall, Septim's reign was plagued by treachery and dissension. In Morrowind, the rise of Dagoth-Ur shook that fiercely independent Dark Elf province to its roots. And in Oblivion, Cyrodiil more and more resembles Rome before the fall. The deaths of the emperor and his acknowledged heirs have lowered the natural barriers between Tamriel and the Daedric homeland, a savage parallel plane of existence known as Oblivion. and the armies of Mehrunes Dagon, have embarked on a war to claim Tamriel. You'll soon learn that Kvatch, a city in western Cyrodiil, has already been virtually destroyed by a vast siege machine. Before long, others will be threatened by the appearance of fiery gateways and the attendant Daedra near their walls. These immortal creatures have long been a source of fascination, hope, and sometimes terror to the people of Tamriel. Conjurers summon Daedra as servants and watchdogs. Others seek to court favor by worshipping at shrines to 15 Daedra lords, usually found in the distant wilderness. And every so often a mortal conspires with a Daedric prince to meddle in earthly affairs. Dagon in particular has a long history of meddling. In Daggerfall, he helped Imperial battle mage Jagar Tharn seize power. In Battlespire, that training college for battle mages was betrayed to his forces, and in Oblivion, he's no longer content with playing the Grey Eminence behind the throne. Why? Well, in a manner of speaking, because this godlike entity can't do his nasty thing in his own house. Imagine being the Lord of Destruction and forced to live in a realm where you can't destroy anything in a permanent sense. Every loose Daedric soul slips down the cosmic drain and is eventually recycled. Thanks for that little bit of lore. In comparatively fragile Tamriel, Dagon's basest instincts, his only instincts we suspect, can get a real workout. Here people die and do not come back. Even emperors can be removed. Cities can be blasted into ruins. A whole civilization potentially laid waste. The task of plotting the broad strokes of Cyrodiil's response falls to the late emperor's illegitimate son Martin and Joffrey, the chief of the Blades, the royal bodyguards. But you are the chief instrument that they wield in the game's central campaign, a desperate struggle whose cost may at length include the lives of friends and allies. Again and again, you'll take the battle into Oblivion in an effort to remove the gate's anchors, and thus the gates themselves from Tamriel. And yet, however desperate, that story will unfold at a pace you establish. The war takes place across a large, vibrant world, and not everything in that world is bent to the service of that struggle. For instance, there are 5 lines of sequential quests. You can be a combatant in the Imperial City's arena, work your way up the ladder and try to displace the current Grand Champion. You can join any of the 4 guilds, each of which is having its own crisis. A weakened Fighters Guild is facing competition from a newly formed mercenary outfit. The banning of the black art of necromancy has set off a struggle between the Mages Guild and organized necromancers. The Thieves Guild is under pressure from a zealous, if overmatched, Imperial Legion captain. And eventually the Dark Brotherhood is going to have some personal issues. You can also perform isolated quests found in your travels, most based in the capital or its satellite cities, the miscellaneous quests, or in small communities that dot the countryside, the settlement quests. You can do the bidding of Daedric princes, though not Dagon himself. He's out of the office. An advanced character can perform the Master Trainer quests to boost their skills to their maximum. And off the beaten track, you'll find other things to do, with little or no direction from the game, and other places to go. Some have elements of stories, although many have stories written only in gold, darkness, and blood. Every dark hole in the ground should be considered its own adventure. How you get to those dark holes is up to you. You won't find public transportation in Cyrodiil. The one boat ride you'll take is unexpected. However, you can buy and ride horses and fast travel between cities. You won't often have to ask for directions. While on a quest, you'll usually know where you're going, thanks to compass and map markers. And knowing where to go is a help, because Oblivion is always in motion. It moves internally, constantly adjusting challenges and rewards to your character's level. And the game world is in motion as well. The non-player characters have their own routines. Many get up and go to work, go out for dinner afterward, and then go home. A number visit neighbors or other cities. Some of them do things that are unexpected. Think of every person as a small mystery. You never know what you'll find. And away we go. There's a lot to unpack there. So, the first thing I want to mention is the difference in the initial idea of how the main quest is going to operate. So in Morrowind, you are the central idea, and the Nerevarine is a pretty indelible part of the story. In this one, you are a surrogate, I would say, would be the proper word to describe, in the sense that this story is more about the Emperor and Martin, the illegitimate son, and you are the engine or the vehicle that puts this change into motion. So I think there is still the conceit that I made in the previous video, which if you want to see you can, but you don't necessarily have to, that in Bethesda games, things are at a precipice and the main character or the protagonist, the person that you play, does have the capacity to push the story into points of no return that have implications for the world, but not necessarily implications that will turn into significance. And that's just the nature of games and creating a static world. The guide likes to think that Oblivion is a kind of viscous, dynamic, moving world, and I buy that on paper. But as far as like having great change of the kind that we would see in the real world and reality, that's not the case, right? So like I said before, the strange bubble timeline where you're at a singular instance in the timeline, but there is this kind of this zooming in or this expansion of that single instance into a set of events that you can dictate. You can play the main quest here, but you also don't have to. And the Emperor seems to have an idea that you're a big part of it, but also, these are prophecies and these are, the stars aligned. And as we saw with Morrowind, that may not be the case. You may not be that person, and someone else would be that person. Just because you see the Emperor die doesn't necessarily mean you are privy to the chance to change Cyrodiil and Martin's involvement in it, in the same way that someone else there who saw it, or someone in Cyrodiil in general, right? Keep in mind that the Nerevarine was an outlander and came in from a prison, so that theme continues. What else do we want to say? I think Patrician TV pointed this out, so I don't want to step on his insight, but the Lord of the Rings and Sauron influence here cannot be overstated. So first of all, you get really similar architectural ideas from Cyrodiil as you do from the White City of Minas Tirith in Lord of the Rings. And Lord Dagon is a relatively simple enemy, whereas with Dagoth-Ur, it seems like we had some quite large past about what Vardenfell was in its relation to the rest of Tamriel, and its independence stood on the brink between incorporation into it through the Imperial Legion as an occupied territory, or from this desire for independence to the point of dominance, as Dagoth-Ur wanted to rebuild Akulakan and begin a sort of war campaign of the kind that he had wanted to do a long time ago, but didn't have the chance to exact. I don't know what, based on the introduction here, what Lord Dagon's plans are, except for mayhem and destruction, in this sort of way that Sauron is. He just wants people to obey him as an entity. So I think it is evil without an iceberg. Like, I think if you wanted to dig deep into why Dagoth-Ur does the things that he does, I think there's a wealth of history that you could explore. It doesn't condone what he does, but it simply offers some insight into why a territory might oppose occupation by the Imperial Legion. I'm not sure if I get that sense here. Like, the difference between a Daedra like Lord Dagon as an enemy is sort of this like abstracted other that exists apart from the world, and I think that's a problem right off the bat. It feels very I don't know, it just doesn't have the heft. I'm so biased, so if you love this game, I'm really sorry. And then the interesting thing here is the end. You won't find public transportation in Cyrodiil, which I find really bizarre. Like, if any territory in the Elder Scrolls universe would have not only great roads, but great public transportation, it would be a settled place like Cyrodiil, would it not? Like, this is supposed to be the Imperial City and the surrounding provinces. And I do understand that the Elder Scrolls world represents a more decentralized idea of what an atavistic past would be like. And we still have roads, but I find it fascinating that there's no like carriages or, boats. There are rivers, where you could take a boat from Leyawiin to the Imperial City. You could take a boat, it looks like, from Anvil up into, well, maybe not there. Perhaps you could put a harbor here, Skingrad, some smaller town that is a minor town to Skingrad. I'm not saying that these have to be like big fast travel options, but it could be interesting. Now, for those who know about Oblivion, you know that it has fast travel, and it's a point of contention between Elder Scrolls players. Some people love it, some people don't. I'm against fast travel on its own, or I'm against non-diegetic fast travel, if only because I think it has an effect on how the world is designed, which may or may not be true. But I have an intuitive notion that it's true. Some limitations to the idea is just that we live in a modern era where we shouldn't have to expect players to walk great distances. I think some of the differences that I'm talking about don't necessarily have to do with space so much as density. I think one of the things I noticed when I was preparing for this video was just how not dense that the world was compared to Vardenfell. I don't really have a good sense of scale of these areas compared to Morrowind. Part of me wants to get in there and just see like what the difference in space is between between one place and another. And if one of the things that I think Todd Howard has talked about with Starfield is just how massive it's going to be with thousands of star systems, thousands of planets. And there is a case to be made that Starfield, as a science fiction universe with mostly empty space, really deserves that kind of porous, soft density where things are not compacted. There's a huge amount of space between things. I think that's great, just because as a No Man's Sky player who just wants to be left alone and finding myself inundated with ships and NPCs and just the desire for multiplayer constantly, I love that idea of loneliness. But I don't know if back then in 2005, if the design of these spaces was quite as effective. Maybe people found the space to be really endearing. I do know that seeing the Cyrodiil landscape, the skybox, and just seeing how vast, the landscape was, I think there is something to be said for that, of just how far in the distance you could see compared to Morrowind, which is actually quite bottled and seems very suffocating. Like I mentioned before, the design of the world into different trails so that they could load things in and out, I think did the game a great disservice. So I think they were trying to get out of that with these huge rolling hills. Be right back. So it stands to reason that they were going for more rolling hills so you could get a sense of just how small you are compared to how big things are. NPCs and their routines. So one of the questions I guess that you'll want to answer as we go along is, was it worth it for NPCs to have lifestyles and routines instead of having more NPCs and having text? So I can see a case for both. Some people may think that the world is more believable by having voice acting and with having NPC routines. Some people think that the complexity of text and more NPCs in Morrowind allowed for the game just to feel bigger. And one of the things I wanted to mention is just how small, the amount of faction quests there are compared to Morrowind. So Mages Guild, Fighters Guild, Thieves Guild, Dark Brotherhood, no house quests, no Imperial Legion. What is there to say that? Just that there's less, so something had to give. And, the difference between the original Xbox and the Xbox 360 as far as technology, in some ways we see more of that with the physics system and with the graphics and with the voice acting. But in other ways we see a whole lot less of it, just in the way that the game is designed from a narrative, from a sense of scale, from the stories, from the coherence of the world. All right, I've bitched enough. Let's get into the main quest. Blimey. The organization of the guide is a little different, and we'll have to see how we feel about it. Also, look how short the guide is, only 370 pages, which I think is fascinating. A prison escape? Actually, it's more like a last-minute pardon. Only, you're not the one in the hot seat. Start by telling the game something about who you are in the world of Oblivion. The default character is a young Imperial male. Isn't it always? I mean, no, it's not, but like, I was being euphemistic. All right. If you just want to get into the game, simply choose a name and select Done. When his guileless face appears on screen, he will serve you as well as any character in this starter dungeon. I'm usually a lady, so I don't appreciate the royal he instead of the royal we. She'll serve you as well as any character in this starter dungeon. Don't worry, you're not stuck with him. You can revise this choice and other choices still to come before you step out into the wide world. Here you pick your character's name, gender, appearance, and most importantly, race. Why did that get evaluated as like the biggest deal? I guess because of the starting stats, but like, okay, so if you want more information on gameplay mechanics, I said this in the Morrowind video, but if you're looking for that, I would highly recommend checking out Patrician TV. He does something that I like, which is that he embeds gameplay mechanics into their respective places in certain guides or certain walkthroughs where it makes sense. So for example, talking about stealth, pickpocketing, and sneaking in the Thieves Guild, or talking about the way magic works through the Mages Guild. And I think that's an appropriate way to break up a lot of the interesting ideas for how the game is designed. So I do believe that would be a better place to check out some of the stuff, especially with level scaling. I believe he talks about it with Arena, because the differences between Morrowind and Oblivion for level scaling, I think, vastly changed the way that combat felt. Not to mention that combat now is not based on dice rolls, but rather is based on damage and health to make it a more action-centric or action-oriented rather than role-playing oriented, a role-playing centric system. So I can see both sides on this one. This one seems a little bit less unequivocal, or it seems more equivocal, right? The debate rages on. Games have continued on in their own way. We have action RPGs, and then we have computer RPGs like Caves of Cud that are strictly based on dice rolls, to the point where it mentions it explicitly that there are dice rolls. So I think, as you can see, there are great games which use both. Diablo 4 just came out, and that action-oriented experience, still clicking, but in a way that feels a lot more embodied, I suppose, than games of the past. So I think regardless, it's all still math. I think the idea that you're going to get away from math by making it real time is a lie, because no matter what, a player's input has to be mediated by maths. So, your mileage may vary, and you're going to have to decide for yourself. This is not that video. We're talking about the design of the quests, the idea of the story, and how it tries to create a sense of tone for the game. I do like how this tutorial gives you a chance to use a character, and then if you don't like what you made, you could make some changes before you leave the tutorial area. That's it. That's all I'm going to say about that. The Imperial Prison. After you click Done, you find yourself in a stony cell. Explore a bit. Approach the cell door to experience the gentle humor of Valen Dreth. He occupies the cell across the hall. Just for kicks, you can create several quickie characters, so you can experience the grand panorama of Dreth's undiscriminating nastiness. He has unique taunts for each of the game's 10 races, and for each gender as well. He stops taunting when visitors appear on the stairs. Dreth makes it sound as though they're coming for you. They're not. They just need to use your cell. I'm not going to go over the map. If you'd like to, these guides are available on archive.org. So if you would like to take a look at some of the things besides the main quest, I would highly recommend that. An old emperor in a hurry. Wow, look at those faces. The visitors are Imperial Uriel Septim VII and 3 members of the Blades, Glenroy, Captain Renault, and Boris. Listen carefully to the dialogue as they approach. It sets up the story for this first stage of the game. The Emperor's sons reportedly have been attacked by assassins. Killed, the Emperor supposes, and the Blades, trying to spirit the Emperor away via an emergency exit before Septim joins his sons in death. You see only 2 Blades until the party enters your cell. The third, Boris, is up the stairs, locking the prison door. Talk to Glenroy and the Emperor through the door. The Emperor is as pleasant as someone who has just learned his children are dead can be, but an urgency lurks behind his words. Glenroy is dismissive, just wants you out of the way. At this stage, you are merely an administrative inconvenience. The cell was supposed to be empty. For the game to progress, you must satisfy his demand that you stand down. Do so now. You can either stand under the high window in the east wall. Oh, you have a window, which allows you a better view of the proceedings, or sit on the stool beside the table. Either way, you're temporarily penned in place. The cell door opens, and the royal party enters. I do remember this being really cool in the game whenever I played. I thought that the effects and just the way that things moved and the way that the dust settled, like, it was nice. Captain Renault moves to the northeast corner. Boris watches the door. Glenroy looks at you with the eyes of a hungry dog. There's a lot of creative license going on here with this guide. Renault presses a big stone in the 7th row up from the floor. Your alleged bed sinks grindingly into the floor. The north wall opens to reveal a dark descending passage. You're free. At least, you're free to explore this large starter dungeon. In the Imperial Prison, Imperial Substructure, Natural Caverns, Imperial Subterrane, and the Sanctum, you will find weapons and armor. You use the weapons to kill rats, a zombie, and perhaps not a few goblins. You learn how to cast a spell and pick a lock. You may sneak past a goblin and deal with a goblin trap. Perhaps you even spring a trap of your own. You also witness a defining event in the history of the Tamrielic Empire. In addition to the advice given to you by the tutorial, here are a few extra things you should know as you make your way through these dark passages. You don't have to remain with the blades, but you have no reason to linger in your cell. The cell door was locked again behind the royal party, and Dreth seems to have shot his bolt. And if you do keep up, you can talk to your new friend, the Emperor, who offers unique commentary at certain points along the way. In the second large room, the royal party reaches the midpoint between 2 sets of stairs, and 4 hooded assassins cascade from a raised area to the west. You are unarmored, and virtually unarmed, so steer clear of the fray, ideally by retreating back down the passage. The blades can handle the attackers. If you attract the assassin's attention, they try to kill you, and they may well succeed. Besides, you can't materially influence the key events in this dungeon. In the company of the Emperor, you are mostly a spectator. When the battle ends, you learn from an exchange between the Blades and Septim that one of those killed was Captain Renault. She led the royal party down the passage and seems to have borne the brunt of the assassin's attack. Damn. You can claim 2 items she was holding, a torch and a sword. By searching around, you can also find an Akaviri katana that she dropped when she was killed. Take them all. The torch is a decided comfort in this deep and dark place. This is where we're going to end up, by the way. I probably should have kept it like that before. At least I think. I might be wrong. See, this is how unversed I am in this game. And you can hold it in one hand when you hold the sword in the other. That's the torch. A word about taking stuff. It is basic to your existence in Oblivion. You'll buy things at the many stores, of course, but you live and die off loot. That is really bizarre that they would... I'll continue on and then I'll talk about it. Fortunately, there's a lot of it about. Each of the assassins has a mythic dawn robe and hood. Their weapons have vanished because they were bound items, and some may carry potions or other useful items. Leave the robes and hoods. They will quickly be superseded by more valuable items, but take any potions. And then there's a little parenthetical, do we want to call that? About this. Right now, you're nowhere near the limit of what you can carry, so take anything that has potential value as a weapon, armor, or magic, or has significant value. If an item has a value in gold listed in your inventory, you can sell it when you get out of here and buy something more useful. Gold is weightless. However, you'll eventually reach your limit of what you can carry and have to decide what to dump and what to keep. Find a convenient location to leave items that don't contribute directly to your mission, but that you're comfortable leaving behind. We scout several such locations in the Imperial City area and the Freeform Quests chapter. In that same chapter, we discuss what's involved in buying a house. So the guide in Morrowind makes a lot of assumptions about what you know before going into the video game. This seems almost like not only are you playing an Elder Scrolls game for the first time, but that you're also just playing a role-playing game for the first time. Like, they're looting things as sort of second nature to a gamer. So I guess that makes sense in a guide. Like, a guide has to sort of explain to a player that, hey, there are certain things that you should pick up. As for Mythic Dawn, the game doesn't make anything of the reference at this point, but this is your first clue. The royal party passes through the locked gate and the door beyond, and you're on your own. Perhaps it's because the Blades, who don't trust you, are running the show. Speak to the Emperor before he disappears. He'll say he knows you'll meet up with the party later, but first you have to pass through the Imperial substructure and the natural caverns after finding a way out of the Imperial prison. A section of the wall crumbles to the southeast. 2 rats advance through the gap. A third waits beyond it. That is hilarious that rats have somehow like broken through the walls. Kill them and then search this new area for loot. Among other things, you'll come up with a bow, armor, and lockpicks. Use the picks to master a simple lock on the door to the southeast, or use the key on the goblin's shaman's body. This is the Imperial substructure. In this new area, you'll find a zombie, some odds and ends of loot, including ingredients, and a whole lot of rats. It's a good thing the rats are weak and suicidal. This is like killing slimes. This is the slime killing portion of the experience. Near the door down into the natural caverns, you'll find your path semi-blocked by a goblin early warning system made by hanging skulls. Clever, those goblins. In the next section of dungeon, you'll have a chance to outwit them. Okay, so something about Todd Howard likes the opening of these games, and for good reason. I think the opening of a game is the hook that gets players invested. And I think for those players who are playing on Steam and have a certain return policy, you want those first 2 hours to be really important. So I don't think that there was ever a moment in Oblivion after the opening where the physics system was used as extensively, right? If it was, I don't remember it being a big deal. So it, has more to do with how objects behave in the world, I suppose, but it wasn't tied to anything related to the game. It was more tied between the player and the game, rather than the game and the narrative, or the game and the world, or or the mechanics, if that makes sense. So it rests further on that side of the spectrum. Is there anything else I wanted to say about this? No. The natural caverns. Maybe I do. So in Morrowind, there is no real combat for a long time up into the first quest, which takes you to Arkanthand from Caius Casades. This starts combat heavy. The game wants you to get used to combat, which makes me feel as though you're going to be doing a lot more combat in this. So will Starfield have an opening that features a lot of combat? Something tells me yes, just because over time combat has been the easy way to resolve conflicts in games in general, and role-playing games in particular, and Bethesda games especially. So a bit nervous about that, frankly. The natural caverns. Up to this point, none of your battles should have been intimidating, unless you did something foolish, like deliberately attacking the blades of the Emperor. However, unlike the giant rats, the goblins who occupy the natural caverns in force are quite another matter. These foes can block and dodge your blows, and their own blows can inflict significant damage. And if you allow them to gang up on you, you're in real trouble. Should I read this, Fighting in Oblivion? There's so much more about the game mechanics in this guide compared to Morrowind's. I know I'm over-stressing that point, but in Morrowind, it didn't really come up at all. The only time that items or objects or gameplay came up was when it was talking about what items you could use that you had received in the main quest. So, that's good to know. This has such brilliant ideas as the watchword is caution. You want to hit without being hit. No shit. Move slowly, use cover, and sneak when on uncertain ground. Be aware of what's around you. Watch your opponent's movements and look for opportunities for ambush. Don't make a habit of fighting 2 or more enemies at a time. If possible, take them on individually, or if you're not up to it, not at all. This whole section of the dungeon can be seen as a series of not at alls. Interesting, so they do expect you to read that because of the transition from not at all to not at all. So I'm not quite sure why they felt like they had to put this in a separate. I suppose if you're into technical writing and design, there is something to be said for this emphasis like this and breaking up the text. I know there are people out there who don't like text and like it broken up like this. Cool. The first goblin in the natural caverns is watching a rat roasting over an open fire when you appear on the scene. You can't ignore him, but leaving live enemies in the darkness behind you isn't always intelligent. Sneak up on him and put a blade in him. You can sometimes use your enemies' traps against them. North and east of the campfire is a chamber guarded by a single goblin. A tripwire stretches across the floor just east of the entrance. Run northeast through the entrance, right through the tripwire, deliberately triggering the trap, and one of the 3 spiked logs pinned to the ceiling takes the guard out for you. You also sometimes want to attract the attention of as many enemies as possible. Right at the end of the natural caverns is a large goblin encampment. 2 of the ugly little monsters guard the entrance, and the remainder are scattered around the camp. Some of these are tough hombres, notably the spellcasting shaman on the far side of the camp. So much more about the combat in this game. Also, like, traps seem so quaint. I wonder if in Elder Scrolls 6 and in Starfield, if, like, these, like, trap scenarios are going to be a thing. Like, I don't know. You can fight the guards one at a time. Engage one in battle, run away to heal, then come back to fight the other one. However, each fight will be tough. Will take a while. And taking out the guards in this way isn't really necessary. Instead, look around. The goblins have left a large pile of logs just up the slope from the entrance. You can activate the stack and wipe out the two of the guards below. But why settle for 2 weaker goblins when you can kill all of them? Also, this doesn't really help your skills. Like, one of the hard things about Oblivion is that you have to outpace the scaling of the game. So to do that, you have to level up in a certain way. Yeah, I'm not sure. Oblivion's very bizarre when it comes to leveling. So if it was me playing through these games again, I would just put them on easy and let sail on sail. Why settle for the 2 weaker goblins and you can kill all of them? Brisk run through the camp will result in you slamming back up the entry slope with a small army of goblins on your tail. If you have a lead on them, activate the stack. And now you're overseeing a bloodbath. Afterwards, mop up any goblins who didn't follow the leader. This maneuver has its hazards, not the least of which is slipping into the pit at the center of the camp, having the goblins pile in after you, and then being roasted over an open fire. So save your game first, and again after you succeed. Once the mopping up is complete, you have control of an enormous hall. To be sure, there's a lot of junk mixed in with the good stuff. Goblins seem to have a deep attraction for junk. Appreciation for junk, I guess. Same significance. Mixed in with the junk are lots of usable odds and ends. Once you're done, make your way out the exit to the Imperial subterrane. Oh wow, quite a lot of stuff about maps. So Morrowind didn't have nearly as much as far as like details of the maps of the world, and yet I think it was a much longer guide. So we'll have to see how much writing there is that we're going to be reading here. Maybe this video will be far shorter for the Oblivion guide. I actually don't know how extensive the main quest. I don't remember how extensive it was. Clearly not as extensive as the main quest in Morrowind with the Nerevarine, the Hortator, fulfilling the prophecies. There's a lot going on there. The Ashlander tribes, like it's night and day probably the difference. We'll see though. Who knows? The Imperial Subterrane. The Emperor and his escorts vanished into the Imperial Subterrane at the bottom of the Imperial prison. Now they're just a hop away. A short corridor leads west to a broken section of wall. Here, peer down into a chamber like the one where he parted ways with the royal party. Watch the Emperor and Blades appear out of the southern tunnel, and listen to Glenroy and Barris quarrel about strategy. So this is, there's NPCs and there's blocking, or there's movement and actions that they take, and there are voices involved. And that is something that Morrowind didn't really have 90% of the time. And this could be a critique against the text strategy that they used in that game, is that NPCs were really menus, embodied menus, I would say, like where you could walk up to them and you could look through their files. And some of them had different file cabinets than others, but they were mostly just repositories for information. And to some extent, NPCs for a long time in games have been that. Oblivion tries to take the tact of giving them actions, giving them agency. We can see the Emperor and the Blades move through the underground in the same way that you can. So, for sure that's new, which is nice if you're into that sort of thing. So there's some dynamism going on. It feels kinetic. There's movement. Their exchange is followed by another assassination attempt. Since you're now set up with weapons and armor, you may be able to participate in the Emperor's defense. However, since it's just 2 assassins this time, Barris and Glenroy may already have dispatched them by the time you're ready. Use the bow and stay on one of the room's upper tiers. However many skinny rats you offed back in the Imperial substructure, you're not remotely ready to go toe-to-toe with the assassins. Finally, Glenroy tries to coax Septim into moving onward, and the Emperor protests that he wants to rest a little longer. That's your cue to show your face. Hop down to the party's level, and the ever-friendly Glenroy promptly orders Barris to kill you as a potential ally of the assassins. Don't worry. The Emperor calls off the dogs. He knows better. You join the royal party. Glenroy still doesn't trust you, but Barris treats you almost like a normal person, and you can question him briefly about the Blades and Septim. And the Emperor is almost fatherly. The death of the father That's very psychoanalytic. Seeking to explain why he trusts you, Septim asks whether you're familiar with the Nines, the state religion, whose deities included Tiber Septim, the first emperor of Tamriel. Evidently, Uriel feels your stars are linked and asks for your birth sign. See the birth sign chapter for help on what to choose. Alas, the Emperor's own star flickers only dimly. He now states plainly that, or what was only implied back in your cell. He has seen his own death. He seems even to have accepted it, but I'll make no predictions for your own destiny, save that it seems bright with possibility. In your face, I behold the sun's companion. The party heads north, with Glenroy unlocking the door. He makes a U-turn heading south for the stairs in the third ambush. If you're fast off the mark, you can make a useful contribution to the Emperor's defense. Ready your bow, drop off the north side of the path, then jump onto one of the ledges that overlook the columned room below from north, west, and south. Let fly. Again, it's not as though these blade bruisers need your help, and you probably won't do much actual damage before they finish the job you start. But even simple hits on the two hard-to-see assassins in the raised areas above the columned room's northeast corner forces them to abandon their positions and ruin the surprise. By shooting at them, you can trigger them early, before the blades arrive in the room where they're watching. You can see into the room from a raised area, but they have to walk to it by a somewhat more roundabout path, and your presence above distracts any of the lower level, giving Glenroy and Boris the opportunity to take some free whacks. I did not know that. Note, try not to shoot your comrades. They forgive you this time, but future comrades may not be quite so tolerant. They make short work of the next three assassins, and the party moves south to the door to the sanctum. Obtaining the amulet. Here it ends and here it begins. Quite a long introduction compared to the Morrowind one, which is just, here's a package, go deliver it, right? Like, even then there's some text-based tutorials that the game wants to teach you if you want, but you can move through the tutorial a lot quicker in Morrowind. There's a strange mood in the air as the party enters the sanctum. The Emperor has just told you he's going to die, and the statement hangs between you like smoke. It's almost as though he's already dead, and you're all just going through the motions. Glenroy obviously smells trouble. He orders the party to hold up while he checks the path to the north. He signals it's clear, and then leads east toward a gate. The gate is locked from the other side, and the blade smells a trap. He's right. The trap lies in a small, apparently enclosed chamber to the north. Perhaps this is the sanctum itself, and perhaps even the defensible position that Glenroy was arguing for back in the subterrane. The blades read it as a dead end. In fact, it's not a dead end, and that fact will be the Emperor's undoing. But these two blades don't know that. After all, it was Renault who opened the escape route in the first place, and Renault who led the way down that dark track. And it may have been Renault, too, who knew this room's secret exit, and she's dead. But there's no opportunity to deal with these subtleties. At this point, Glenroy and Boris suddenly run off to deal with the assassins, who've appeared to the rear, leaving you alone to defend the Emperor. You can follow the blades. If you do, they kill the assassins in the big room to the south and Glenroy dies. But things won't progress until you return to the Emperor. If you stay with the Emperor, you have a moment before he speaks to you. If you've taken damage, this would be a good time to restore your health to full. If you follow the blades out, Boris will periodically shout at you to stay back and protect the Emperor, and the fight will continue indefinitely until you return to the room where the Emperor is waiting. Sensing that his end is nigh, Septim places in your care an artifact called the Amulet of Kings and charges you to take it to someone named Joffrey. He does not further identify the amulet or say who Joffrey is or where to find him, only that he knows where to find my last son. The Emperor also talks of the Jaws of Oblivion and the Lord of Destruction. It's good that he had a backup son. It's always good to have a contingency plan of setting up franchises in the event that an assassination attempt is on your life. Wow, look at this, like CSI Cyrodiil look. The conversation is no sooner ended than a stone panel arises in the room's northeast corner, and a mythic dawn assassin appears and slashes the Emperor just like that. It's over. Septim is dead. The assassin's still very much alive and kicking, and you're no more capable of killing this one on your own than you were back in the Imperial prison. Stay out of range of his dagger until Boris reappears on the scene and takes off the heat. Boris doesn't blame you either. He blames himself, nor does he accuse you of swiping the Amulet of Kings. He realizes that the Emperor saw something in you, and because the Emperor trusted you, Boris trusts you despite the fact that you're an escaped convict carrying a divine artifact, which you claim the Emperor handed you himself seconds before a guy with a red hood and a magic dagger came through a secret door. Is the guide covering for the weirdness of the narrative devices of the game? There are some moments in this guide that you get the sense that the person writing the guide, that may just be confirmation bias. I may be reading too much into how the guide was designed. Barnes tells you that Joffrey is the Grand Master of the Blades and lives as a simple monk in Wayne Priory. The priory is almost straight west from the sewer's exit, in the woods southeast of the city of Coral. Okay, this is not the right exit. Yeah, well, maybe it is. Oh, man. We'll have to see. You don't get a lot of directions in Oblivion. Like, just as I'm doing this, right? It knew ahead of time. What an ironic statement given in Morrowind. All you're given is directions. Like, the journal gives you directions. The NPCs give you directions. Like, notes give you directions. The compass has a directional marker, and assigned destinations are highlighted on the game map, so it's hard to get lost. Again, there's so much about the text translations of gameplay into or to the player. Like, I don't feel like there was any of this in the Morrowind game. Like, the touch points for the player and the mechanics are quite light. You know, you have menus and you do things in the world, but there are a lot of things that are done in your head. In this game, it seems like there are a lot less things that are done in your head that are embodied in the world. But then the guide has to explain how to maneuver through those things. So it's hard to get lost. The only time directions are required is when you're looking for a location to which the game hasn't expressly directed you. That won't happen often until the Freeform Quests chapter. Only time directions are required is when you're looking for a location to which the game hasn't expressly directed you. That is so fascinating. There's a lot of writing in that sentence. Hopefully it explains itself. You probably still have lots of questions, but it's time to go. All you can do at this point is enter the secret passage opened by the assassin, Boris. He's staying to guard the Emperor's body and fight off any pursuers, but you'll see him again before too long. Moving right along. You're not out, but you're almost out. Descend the stairs and follow the depression in the floor west and north to a door, for which Boris gives you a key. Inside is a well entrance, a manhole cover you activate to reach the final section. Beyond, a large chamber has a trench running down the middle. You find a couple of goblins and a rat in here. Dispose of them, and on the far side of the trench you find a wheel you can activate to open the second chamber entrance. It's just northeast of the Emperor Prison, compounded on an island in the northeast corner of Lake Romare. Northeast corner? Okay. Yep, that's definitely it, because here's the dock, and then here's the shrine or whatever on the opposite side. Yeah, I remember that. Whoops. I apologize, dear reader, dear viewer, for not knowing that. And that makes sense, right? Here's the prison, and then here's the secret way out. There's a gate to Oblivion right there. I guess after the Oblivion crisis officially starts, right? Enter the room and take the stairs leading up. Follow the path over the bridge, and through the gate you may find a few additional rats to kill along the way, and eventually you come to the final gate. Don't like your character? Maybe you made a mistake with your birth sign? Or your experience in the dungeon has taught you that you're want to play a little differently than you thought. Proofreading, guys. When you activate this last gate leading outside, you're offered the opportunity to tweak your character's race, birth sign, and class. Essentially, you can change any of the decisions you've made to this point, even your name. Save your game here, as it allows you to quickly start a new game without playing through all the previous dungeons. Once you've made any changes you want to your character, head outside. Quickly start a new game without playing through all the previous dungeons. That is a pro tip right there. That's pretty good. I wouldn't think to do that. Once you made changes to your character, head outside. Okay, well, here we are, through the tutorial section. Are there things I want to say about the tutorial section before I move on? I don't think there's anything that is novel or original that I could say that people haven't already said in the past about how extensive the tutorial is compared to Morrowind, which is quite short. The benefits of an extensive tutorial are that it simultaneously introduces you to the gameplay mechanics, but it also introduces you, like the main quest does, to the tone of the world that Bethesda wants to hand over to the player. In this case, through the Emperor, you're getting a sense of what the main quest is going to be about. You learn a little bit about the world, you learn a little bit about the blades, bits and pieces, so you're getting just as much of the world as you are from combat. I don't know, how much weight do you want to put on a tutorial for games that you can play hundreds of hours in, right? it's such a small part of a much larger experience. And, Todd Howard likes the beginnings, but I don't know if players who are big fans of Bethesda really give that much credence to, or the same amount of weight to the idea of a tutorial, or the idea of an opening of a game. So, who's to say? There are games that I think don't necessarily have the best openings that I love, and vice versa. So, we should move on. The world of Cyrodiil. You exit the sewers just northeast of the Imperial City. You're on an island in the northeast corner of Lake Rumere, which serves as the capital's moat. What comes next? It's up to you. You can try the Aelid Ruin just across the lake from where you left the sewers. At the moment, you have only one official quest. Deliver the Amulet of Kings to Joffrey at Wayne and Priory. So, delivering a package to Caius, delivering an amulet to Joffrey. I think the parallels between that and Morrowind are there. The context does feel different, though. I'll talk about it later. But despite the sense of urgency that accompanied the Emperor's and Boris's last speeches, okay, maybe the guide's going to bring it up for us, that mission will keep. The game will adjust its pace to yours. Cyrodiil is full of adventures, large and small, and you can explore freely in any direction, beginning now. Okay, the Emperor's just died, and they want you to know that you can take a back step off of this and go explore the world. That's fascinating. Patrician TV has talked about the direness, or the sense of urgency, so I'm not gonna go watch that video if you want a better idea of how the sense of urgency can detract from a person's experience of being in the world. I don't really know how I feel about this yet. I do want to bookmark it because I would like to go through the main quest more before I start to evaluate this kind of stuff. So we basically have to keep on, but it's nice to know that there's a little bookmarked part where the guide thinks that you can leave now to go do other things. If it was me, I might do this later based on the tangential memories I have about the Oblivion main quest, but we'll see. Let's move on. Most importantly, fast travel is limited to locations you know about or have discovered. At the start of the game, that includes Anvil, Burville, Bruma, Cheydinhal, Coral, the outskirts of Kvatch, Leowen, Skingrad, and the Imperial City's 8 districts. To discover a location, you must pass by it on foot. In this respect, fast travel is rather like flying with the shade down. You can't make out any details along the way. Nice metaphor. Note too that quests don't require the use of fast travel. While you'll routinely work to mesh your schedule with those of wandering NPCs, only on occasion will the game require you to be in a particular location at a particular time, and you can't miss those appointments in any permanent sense. Sooner or later, they'll roll around again. The more you walk now, the more locations appear on your map, and the more you'll be able to use fast travel later. Even if you can't zap straight to a destination, increasingly you'll find you can fast travel to a location nearby and then walk the remaining distance. Oops. I don't know how to read a book. Okay, so I forgot to read down here before I made it up to the column here. So, fast travel versus slow travel. Boy, oh boy, they are talking about it right up front. All these gameplay mechanics that I wanted to avoid. Delivering the amulet. The trip west should be uneventful. If you use fast travel to get to the city of Coral, it's virtually guaranteed to be. You appear just inside the gates, exit, and follow a road a short distance southeast to the Priory. Okay, let's find Coral first. Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. So, okay, the world is quite large. And so you're effectively going, I mean, that's still quite a distance compared to, if you recall, the difference between Seyda and Balmora, right? I think the difference is that in Seyda you could take the Soul Strider. In Oblivion, you can fast travel to the city of Coral, and then you can just head southeast to Wayne and Priory. So I think maybe in their eyes it was about the same, about the same distance. However, it is recommended that you walk all the way to the Priory, if only to get into the habit. That is an interesting phrase, to get into the habit of walking everywhere. So, if you know anything about the quest design in Oblivion, which Patrician TV talked about with how the game wants you to go back and forth, which I don't know. We'll see if that is a good statement to make about the fast travel. I think it might be a little bit more necessary than what they're saying here. Anyway, fast travel is a great convenience. You simply select a destination and appear there with none of the potential complications like combat with wandering creatures and potential distractions like off-the-books adventures of foot travel. You won't have to wait longer than it takes to load a new region. While fast travel resembles teleportation, it is not instantaneous. Time does pass. How much time depends on a number of factors. How far you're traveling. Active spell effects that influence speed. How far you're traveling. Active spell effects that influence speed. Your current level of encumbrance, whether you're on horseback or not. If you're not, on your own natural speed. Running at the time you enter fast travel doesn't influence your subsequent speed. Hence, the fast traveler who leaves Anvil in the morning will find it is night upon arrival in distant Leyawen. You can speed things up a bit by unequipping armor and weapons before you use fast travel. However, fast travel does carry with it some limitations and conditions. You can't fast travel out of combat. Note that you're considered to be in combat once an enemy has decided to attack you, regardless of whether or not you're trading blows or you can even see the creature. Players of Bethesda games know that once you hear the combat music, you know you're not fast traveling anywhere. You can't initiate it while indoors, and you can't fast travel when spell effects are damaging your health. Okay, I read some of this. The more you walk now, the more locations appear on your map, and the more you'll be able to use fast travel later. Even if you can't zap straight to a destination, increasingly you'll find you can fast travel to a location nearby and then walk the remaining distance. There are dozens upon dozens of locations out there, from small settlements to caves to fortresses to mines to tombs to shrines to isolated farmhouses. To experience Oblivion fully, walk every established route and blaze your own trails into the wilderness. Just because the game doesn't expressly dispatch you into a given region doesn't mean there's nothing there. On this trip, for instance, you'd miss 2 locations on a straight route from the sewers exit to Wayne Priory. One is Sinkhole Cave. Here we are. A big bandit lair on the north side of the Imperial City. How is there a bandit? It's like right here. This isn't Vardenfell. This is like the capital. That cleared out makes a nice if rather rough and tumble home for a beginner adventurer or the other. In the woods west of the northwest corner of Lake Rumere is Yellow Tick Cave. Bingo. Look how much space there is in between things. A conjurer's hideaway that introduces the game's main enemy, the Daedra. The game's main enemy? Okay, I guess like scamps and so forth. Wow. Well, there's a lot of game philosophy in this paragraph. So the game has fast travel, but the guide thinks that you should walk as much as possible. We will see in the main quest whether that's feasible. I know for a fact that in some faction quests, it's not questions, it is not feasible. There's a lot of back and forth, and it doesn't make a lot of rational sense to do those walks back and forth, especially if you've uncovered already what lies between. So I just don't believe it. The game seems to have been designed from the ground up with fast travel in mind. So we'll see, right? Okay, priorities. All right, so we'll just have it from Yellow Tick Cave to Wynn Priory. Interestingly, there are a couple places on the way to from Satanine to Balmora in a similar way that there are a couple places in a direct path from the prison to Wayne Priory. I think that's cool. Some kind of off the beaten path stuff. That's kind of all there is to say about that. I guess we should continue with the main quest. Where's Joffrey? Depending on when you've arrived at the Priory, he could be in one of 3 places. Yeah. So here's the NPC schedules. NPCs follow schedules. Sometimes pretty elaborate schedules. They work during the day. Sometimes they go out to sleep. They sleep to eat. They sleep at night. Will Starfield have NPC schedules? Like, I don't know. That is a fascinating idea. Like, you would think that they would just continue in that vein, but I don't know. We'll have to see. Like, is it an emphasis for Starfield? Like, will NPCs travel from one place to another? Like, that would be difficult to find them at any given point, right? If you're on some miscellaneous quest and you're looking for somebody, it just doesn't seem possible or feasible. But I mean, I could be wrong. It's hard to sell that as a feature. For most of the day, when you enter the Priory, Prior Maborel, Maypearl gets up from the table and offers his help. You can tell him your business is private, which elicits an unsettling comment about another mysterious visitor. This may seem ominous, but is simply a reference to other blades calling on the Grandmaster of their order. Or you can simply ask for Joffrey to be directed to his current location. You can also ask Maypearl about other topics, among them the Priory itself, which elicits comments about Septim's death and references to a news account of the assassinations. Maypearl gives you his newspaper already. From the time between when you've left the prison sewers to Wayne and Priory, there's already news about it. A lengthy biography of the late Emperor is lying on the table. Read it. It's a good idea to get into the habit of reading the game's books. Many contain background information that, even if not directly concerned with events in Cyrodiil, helps provide a context for them. Some have good stories, and some, called skill books, boost one of your skills by 1 point. Skill is specified in the book. You don't get to choose, and it isn't random. Maypearl may not tell you everything he knows. See the section that's still a lot of persuasion for details on how to get more information out of people. Cool. Hey, go read the books. I'm a reader, so I'm not gonna hack too much on that. I think it's a great idea. People should read the damn books. If you haven't noticed, I'm very biased on that. In addition, across the table, you'll find a letter from another monk, Brother Piner, to his mother in the Imperial City. No, it's not polite to read other people's mail, but it certainly sheds an interesting light on events. In it, Piner makes light of the assassination's consequences. It's horrible and depressing, he writes, but the Empire will survive. Note that this is only the current version of the letter. You also find 3 crumpled papers next to it, earlier drafts that suggest something of the desperation of his mother's original message and the young monk's tense relationship with his old mom. They also give a taste of the mood abroad in Cyrodiil, and it is a shadow of things to come. Wow, this guide is doing its damnedest to make the Oblivion world feel as though it's has the density of Morrowind. So maybe I was wrong. Maybe it's there the whole time, and I just wasn't paying attention. So that's a nice detail. Like, some of those details were in Morrowind. I think those moments happened every now and then, but okay. Pleasantly surprised. Maybe this is more of Todd's opening, and so careful emphasis is placed on stuff like this. Anyway, you're most likely to find Joffrey at his desk in the Priory's library, the eastern room on the second floor. Turn over the Amulet of Kings and repeat the Emperor's last words. The monk clears up some questions outstanding from your final exchange with Septim. The Prince of Destruction the Emperor mentioned is Mehrunes Dagon, one of the Daedra Lords who rule the world of Oblivion, and a recurring figure in the recent history of Tamriel. He was an important figure in Daggerfall, and had a cameo in Morrowind as well. Dagon shouldn't pose a threat to the mortal world. It is protected from Oblivion by magical barriers. So why did the Emperor perceive a threat from Oblivion? Because he's dead? Joffrey doesn't know, but he does seem to have an idea. The Grandmaster seems to imply that those dragonfires themselves are the wards that separate Oblivion from the mortal plane. Some repetitions of concepts. So we have the Ghost Fence in Morrowind, which separates Dagoth-Ur from the rest of Vardenfell. And here we have a general understanding of how the Daedra and Oblivion remains separated from Tamriel. So I don't know what to make of that repetition. Just say that it's there, to acknowledge it, to move on. Find the heir. Joffrey also tells you about Septim's illegitimate son. His name is Martin, and he's a priest in the chapel of Akatosh in the city of Kvatch. Joffrey charges you with the task of rescuing the heir. Joffrey correctly suspects he's in danger, and bring him back to the Priory. He offers some help of a practical nature by unlocking the nearby chest and offering free use of its contents. Take him up on it. If you're coming straight from the sewers, this is a major upgrade of your armor and weapons. Talk to Brother Piner. He's one of the monks who wanders around Wayne Priory, and who turns over a book, The Warp in the West, a compendium of intelligence reports about an apocalyptic event that achieved the miracle of peace in the Empire's war-torn Iliac Bay region. This is a skill book. Reading it will bump up your block skill by 1. I think since he's giving a book, we won't read it, because in the previous video, if you haven't seen that, we read notes that we were given through the main quest, and I don't think that this is as necessary of a read But it is kind of one of those background information things that helps to establish the world of Oblivion. So it's nice that the game is offering you some information in text form rather than voice acting. On the grounds, you're likely to run into Ironor, a dark elf who works here as a shepherd. Ask him about assistance, and he contributes a repair hammer that you can use to repair your armor and weapons. No idea that happened. Finally, locate Maybroll. He offers the use of his paint horse, which is housed in the stable on the north side of the building. This appears to be just a loan, but in fact, it's a gift. Even if you don't talk to Maybroll about it, he effectively bequeaths it to you. Alas, Maybroll is not long for this world. Spoiler alert. Should we read the horse stuff? I don't really want to read the horse stuff. Horses do things. Maybe after the success of the Legend of Zelda games, they thought to themselves that we should have a horse. I don't know. That was a long time ago, though. Like, I don't know. The subtle art of persuasion. Another parenthetical. Is there anything here that I care about? No, it's mostly talking about speechcraft. There is a speechcraft minigame compared to just being able to taunt or bribe or intimidate or praise, like in Morrowind. In Morrowind, if you have enough money, I just bribed everybody, and that seemed to work okay. I forget how the speechcraft skill works in Oblivion. I know that there were separate cells, and how filled in or how color-coded they were dictated how effective the certain speechcraft that you wanted to try on them, based also on their facial reactions to whatever option you chose. It was very dumb. It was like, I don't know. Even back then, I think it had its limitations. Also, look how orange this guy looks. All right. Kvatch. So, I don't really get a sense that there is a Morrowind equivalent to the Oblivion and Skyrim way that they totally destroy a town. I'm trying to think of nope, Kvatch is something a little bit more original, I guess, for whatever that's worth. Okay, are you ready for Kvatch? Unfortunately, Kvatch is not ready for you. Most of the city is in ruins. Fast travel takes you to the city proper, but to a refugee camp to the south. Probably there. The mood is one of despair and barely muted panic. Hertel, who speaks to you automatically upon your arrival, says that Kvatch has been destroyed by Daedra, a bit of an exaggeration, and that Martin must be dead. Then he takes off to the west. You find him later at the Flowing Bowl Tavern in Anvil. Okay, that's pretty cool. There's rain, pretty good weather effects in Oblivion, but there was also blight storms in Morrowind, which were incredible. The 5 other NPCs have tales of grief and loss, but say only that Martin didn't make it out of the city and suggest that Savli and Mattias at the barricades to the north may know more. The camp route has some advantages. It has bends. You can use these to level up if you haven't done so already. You'll probably need the extra stat points soon. You may even do a little business here. Naturally, the orc smithy, Batul Gra Sharab, and Nord alchemist Sigrid have nothing to sell, as they left it all behind when they escaped from Kvatch. But the Batul Grab Sharab can repair your armor for a price and in a very limited way buy weapons and armor you don't need. Meanwhile, Sigrid can buy potions and ingredients. How about getting there under your own power? If traveling by horse, detour southeast back to Lake Rumiere, and then southwest towards Skingrad and west to Kvatch. So, here's Wayne. You can take the road south, and then you can start taking it west. You could take a roundabout way through Skingrad, and so all the way to here. So if you didn't want to go straight from Wayne Priory, you could take the long way around onto settled territory. Or you can walk directly to the city itself, passing through a trackless wilderness along the eastern edge of the Colovian Highlands, which I suppose is what we just talked about here, which is this sort of biome, right? This. When your route bumps up against the foothills of the Imperial Reserve, you find in quick succession the Iliad ruin at Windir. Oh, right there. So as if you're doing a straight path. The abandoned Fort Carmala, which may be your first experience with vampires, and what seems to be a ghost town called Hackdirt, which turns up in the miscellaneous quest A Shadow over Hackdirt. Fort Carmala. Oh, those are so close together. Look at this. They're right down the hill or whatever. Bam, bam, bam. Farther southwest is Fort Dirish, now under new management as an undead dungeon. The isolated farm of Weatherlay, the subject of another miscellaneous quest, Legacy Lost. And there's a lot of stuff. Okay, this is sort of the density that I was hoping for, right? Like, look at all that's going on here. Oh, wow, except there are 2 gates of Oblivion that are like right next door to each other. And the Sanguine Shrine, where you get the Daedric quest, Sanguine. Refer to the Daedric quest chapter for more details. Here the woods end and the foothills begin. Past Fallen Rock Cave, here we go, which figures in the Fire's Code quest's unfinished business, the Shard Rock Farm, and a second Aelid ruin, Miscarcand. You visit Miscarcand on official business much later in the main quest. My god, it seems like every place is also double dipping as some kind of quest line. So there's a lot more efficiency, I suppose, when it comes to how they designed their spaces. There's Shard Rock. I did not find Miscarcand. Oops. Oh, it's because I didn't have it zoomed in enough. Where's this son of a bitch? Oh, it's right there in front of me. That's embarrassing. It's right there, big. Now you've reached roughly the borderline of the Kvatch-Skingrad Road. Kvatch is just to the west. Yeah, so you could just take it down and then take the road the rest of the way. Right, and you'll probably have to. I suppose you could come in from the north, which is, I think it's just about to talk about that. Are you too late for Kvatch? Absolutely, but look at it this way. You're here early for the rapture. The walls are scorched, the trees are all burnt. A flaming, rippling, dimensional gate stands in front of the city gates. When you place your cursor over it, you see the word Oblivion. It's interesting to use the rapture as we Americans love our hellfire and destruction. Godlike. The 5 other NPCs have tales of grief and loss, but say only that Martin didn't... Oh, I already read that. That's embarrassing. All right, here we go. You see the words Oblivion. Uh-oh. Did anyone get out of Kvatch? Many did not. Talk to Savli and Mattias beyond the barricade, south of the gate. He's running what's left of the town guard, to learn that some survivors took refuge in the chapel, and that the Count and his men are holed up in the castle. Mattias plans to hold his ground to prevent the encampment of survivors to the south from being overrun. The good news, Mattias has seen Martin. The bad news, he saw him leading a group toward the chapel of Akatosh. He's still inside the city, and you'll have to get him out. Breaking the siege. There's so much combat. Like, just think about how Morrowind starts and how much of it is based on information gathering and intrigue and discovery. There's so much of this is like, you're breaking out of the prison, you're breaking into Kvatch, you're stopping the siege, and that's cool. I hope that there are going to be other types of quests besides just ones that have combat. Breaking the siege. Offer to help, and Mattias will give you what he supposes is a suicide mission. He thinks it is possible to close this Oblivion gate. After all, he reasons, the enemy opened and later closed the smaller ones that were used to launch its assault on the city. He sends you into Oblivion to help the men he's sent before you, or, if they're beyond help, to see what you can do on your own. Pass through the gate to enter a hellish scene. Yeah, this is very Dante. Dante's Inferno. An island in a vast sea of lava. Great dark towers loom to the north. In the distance you see suggestions of movement. Non-human movement. I will say, just off topic, that the first time you enter an Oblivion gate, it's pretty cool. Like, it's so bizarrely different than the pastoral setup and just the, I don't know, the parochial patrician landscape of Cyrodiil, and then this hellish, like, freak world. I think that's cool. It's a great juxtaposition, right? It's a great contrast. Now, doing Oblivion gates over and over again, I don't know. You know, is that worth it? I think to some people who enjoy content rather than bespoke experiences, who's to say? Pass through the gate, enter a hellish scene, an island, non-human movement. To the northwest, north, and northeast stretch 3 bridges. To the northwestern and northern bridges leads to a larger landmass. However, the northwestern bridge is broken, and on the northern one, a great gate is slowly closing. You can't get through before it does, and you learn on approaching the closed gate that it can't be opened from here. Through a gap between the gates, you can see the bodies of 4 town guards. In fact, 2 Kvatch guards survived the prior mission. Check the area between the northwest and northern bridges to find a terrified fellow named Ilind Vonius. He discloses that another guard, Menian, has been taken to a large tower, presumably the central spire and the cluster to the north. He offers to come along on a rescue mission, or you can save his life for later battles by telling him to join Savli and Mattias at the barricade. Pretty cool, you get a choice there. But how to get across the lava to investigate? Forget the bridges. A path across the lava extends north from the area where you found Vonius. When you arrive on the far side, you're in enemy territory. Should we re-level it? Leveled enemies. Maybe I should just talk about it. Enemies encountered here vary. In an open-ended game like Oblivion, it's impossible to predict exactly when a player will take on any given quest. For instance, many players come straight out of the starter dungeon and start on the main quest right away. In that case, you'll find lots of scamp runs, the giant rats of the Daedric world, here. Nevertheless, methodically clear them out, partly for the experience and partly just to avoid nasty situations where a bunch attack at once. But many players go off and find their own adventures, coming to the main quest later with an improved character. To provide a suitable challenge for that advanced character, enemies in Oblivion have been leveled. That is, the enemy you face in any given combat is adjusted to your character's current level. So as you go up in a level, the scamp runs turn into Clanfear runs, little Daedric dinosaurs with spellcasting ability. Okay, blah blah blah. So in the Morrowind video, I came up with the idea that the beginning of the main quest should be played at the beginning of the game. The middle of the main quest should be played in the middle of a person's playthrough, i.e. if they were playing a 100-hour playthrough, it should be at hour 50, and then killing Dagothur at the end of Morrowind should be the last thing that a character is going to do in the game, period, at level 100. And of course a player doesn't have to do that, but to me, narratively speaking, it seemed like the most ideal way. Here it seems the game is reinforcing the idea that you can do the main quest, at least gameplay wise, in any order, and the game will compensate for that in its enemy choices and in its leveled enemies. So at least so far we have a different theoretical perspective on how this goes about. At the top of the tower, near the northwestern bridge, look for a gate switch against the west wall. Alas, it's not a switch for the Oblivion gate. That would be too easy. But for the 3 bridge gates, but it does smooth your escape path if you decide you're overmatched, with the minor drawback that opening the gates on the northern bridge releases 3 Daedra. Kill these through the gaps between the gates before you start across. Ooh, that's dirty. Watch where you stand on the lift platform on the way back down the tower. There are spikes. Your next destination is the large central tower to the north. This is the sole entrance to a complex that also includes the western and eastern satellite towers. The northern satellite can be entered only through a small cave in the island's northeast corner. This is the first of many such complexes in the main quest. They're all generally similar. A central citadel flanked by side halls in which you do much of the actual climbing and topped by a sigil keep, wherein you find the sigil stone that must be displaced to close an Oblivion gate. Oof, that is a severe put down that they all look the same. It's easy to imagine in Starfield that there may be, if there are procedurally generated planets, that there can be procedurally generated like facilities, dungeons, however you want to go about it, that exist in Starfield as Radiant quests or whatever. Like, I have heard that they have evolved the Radiant quest system quite a lot, and I'm 24 hours away from hearing more about Starfield and its Starfield Direct, so, you know, it's sort of a moving target right now. We'll have to see. Good God, are you seeing this? So, you're welcome to look at this on your own if you'd like. I'm not going to sit here and waste your time looking at all these map readouts. This didn't happen nearly as much in the Morrowind guide. It typically trusted you to find things. It's so ironic that the quest markers and the compass and fast travel, and here they are showing you so much more of maps and like where to get around. I guess that's to compensate for the lack of like relative location. You know, they tell you exactly where to go with the compass and the objective markers, but they don't offer you some relative locations about how to get your bearings. And so maybe that's what the maps are for. Anyway, okay, so we're pretty close to the end of this section. From the Daedric Citadel, enter the rending halls and then the Citadel again. Climb to the corridors of Dark Salvation and cross the bridge to the Eastern Tower. This is so nerdy. At the top, await the unfortunate Minion and a Dremora sigil keeper, who may make a rather bloodthirsty little speech before he surrenders his sigil key. I remember that sound. It was like an underwater dying sound. It was kind of horrifying. Talk to the caged Minion. You can't rescue him, but he tells you what to do next. Find the sigil keep and take the sigil stone. He doesn't give the keep's location, but you doubtless noticed out in the main citadel that you've only climbed part of the tower, Your newfound key will open the doors in your path. Return to the corridors of Dark Salvation and use the north door. Where the corridor levels out, watch for a spear trap. At the top, enter the Citadel yet again. You need to reach the lift on the high side of this tier. Here's where things get nasty. On the way, you're charged by 2 Dremora. This must be the suicidal part Mattias was talking about. Fighting here isn't a serious option for a basic character, but sneaking, or simply running, can get you to the lift intact. At the top, climb to one of the 2 Sigil Keep entrances. Activate the Sigil Stone at the top. This is the Oblivion Gate's anchor in the Daedra world. With the anchor gone, the gate is adrift. It collapses upon itself, but not, thank goodness, before depositing you back outside Kvatch's scorched walls. Your path into the city is clear. Make your way back to the barricades in Mattias. You have a couple of potions. Mattias proposes that you and his small command, which now includes Vonius, launch an assault to free Kvatch. He seems in a hurry. Everybody seems in a big hurry in Oblivion, but there's actually no rush. If you need a breather, ask your young commander to wait, fast travel down to the refugee camp, and take a nap in one of the tents. Most of the folks here thank you for closing the Oblivion Gate. When you're ready, climb back up the mountain, talk to Mattias again, and give the go-ahead. The little force, boldly charges into the city and helps you carve up the Daedra. There seems to be this, we haven't seen this before, but this, tension between the writer of the guide. So maybe I wasn't in confirmation bias when it came to the guide. The guide is at pains to remind the player that you do not have to be so dedicated to doing things back to back to back, right? You can take your time. You could leave, and perhaps, Kvatch would remain in ruins, and you could leave right now and go do a bunch of other quests and then return. Who's to say? So it's fascinating, the strange disagreements between the guide and the game. Note that you have to kill all the Daedra in and around the plaza outside the chapel. That includes as many as 3 in the ruined building southwest of the chapel. Otherwise, Martin, sitting in a pew near the front of the church, won't agree to leave with you, and your reception from town guardsman Tierra will be notably hostile. I'm trying to remember a quest in Morrowind, a single main quest in Morrowind where you had to kill everyone. Usually in the quests, you only had to kill certain NPCs or certain enemies and then return with an object. In this, they want you to kill everyone. They want you to kill all the Daedra. I don't remember a quest in the main quest where you had to kill all of them. They really want you to fight people, don't they? I don't know. Martin feels this way because he's a good guy. I guess he's I don't want to leave until the rest of these people are okay, which I guess gives a little bit of characterization or background into how he behaves and how he thinks. Note too that you can climb to the top of the ruined building and survey the destruction. The city to the west and north is largely gone. What isn't gone is burning. To the northwest, a castle is in flames. If you talk to Mattias after he enters the church, he asks for your help in reclaiming that fortress. To be sure, success in this mission will contribute to the army you raise in the later main quest segment, Allies for Bruma. But the battle for Castle Kvatch isn't a required part of the main quest. It's a miscellaneous quest, which is addressed in the miscellaneous quests chapter. Okay, interesting. So like Arkanthand, the first major combat quest, you can return to that quest, or you can return to that location for a follow-up. And similarly, later on in the main quest, there is a person whose son, I believe, has been kidnapped, and you can return and you do something with information for the main quest. But you can also do this other embellished part of the quest. An embellishment, I guess, is what we should be calling these. And I like those. I think in hindsight, those are nice ways to make the world feel alive, where there's this offshoot that you can participate in that splits from the main quest. And so you get this feeling that this is a real event that continues on even if you leave. So if you leave, you still have the narrative sense that it's still going on. If you stay, you get the gameplay fun of continuing an event to the end. So I think Bethesda likes these sort of things, these quests after quests, or these optional endings, because it makes the world feel more alive in either respect. You can chat briefly with the 2 town guards, Barrick and Ian, who refuses to let you pass through the north door. This is reserved for the miscellaneous quest, the Battle of Castle Kvatch, and Tierra, the ranking officer here. You can explore the lower regions of the church and via a door at the east end of the Undercroft. Exit into the otherwise inaccessible eastern section of Kvatch. Here the destruction is virtually total. What you may not realize initially is that Mattias and the other town guards follow you into the church. In or out of your hearing, Tierra will report to Mattias. There are more survivors, but they didn't stay, and then order the civilians to evacuate to the refugee camp. That's where you find Martin. Finally, you don't have to go into Kvatch with Mattias' troops. You can take down the Daedra around the church yourself, though we expect this will be a rather dicey business for a starting character. Alas, you'll never be able to clear them out to Martin's satisfaction. As soon as you turn your back, they'll creep back. You need to call in Mattias and company to keep them from responding. The Oblivion Crisis. Okay, I should read this because it's kind of based in there's gameplay, but there's also narrative. This is not a quest. This is like the Sleepers and Dreamers of Morrowind, though it can provide the raw material for dozens of independent quests. At the moment, it's just an invisible event, the flicking of a switch in the game's dark heart. When Martin agrees to follow you to Wayne and Priory, you set off the Oblivion Crisis. At this point, Oblivion gates can open in certain locations in the wilderness all across Cyrodiil. Oh, okay. So maybe that's why there are 2 Oblivion gates fairly close by here on the way to Wayne and Priory, just because they want you to see that they're existing in the world. The gates pop up randomly, but typically the gate can appear in remote areas of Cyrodiil not otherwise occupied by a named location, though you'll find some close to cities. Oh, okay, so maybe these both don't appear, but it's one or the other. I have a little bit of confusion for how this relates to the map proper, like if what we're seeing is explicit or if what we're seeing is a possibility. And I know for a fact that Starfield is going to operate in the same way, where there are certain ideal places that a Radiance quest could take place in, but it will be different for some players. So I think that is just a continuation of what they've done with Oblivion. Just refer to the maps for a more complete list of all the possible Oblivion Gate appearances. So I guess if I wanted to, I could look that up myself. Kvatch variants. I think I may want to continue this. Actually, I forgot to read. I'm such an idiot. Once again, I forgot to read this left column. I just went ahead and went immediately. It's possible some players will bypass Wayne and Priory and simply show up at Kvatch. That'll work too, but the quest unfolds a little differently. This reminds me of the possibilities for Morrowind of getting to things in different orders. You can deal with Mattias and rescue the survivors holed up in the chapel, but as you haven't learned yet about Martin, you can ask refugees or guards. When you find him, he's just a guy in a church, and you get no special septimize your daddy dialogues. He'll be evacuated to the refugee camp. You must deliver the amulet to Joffrey to get Martin's name, and then return to the camp to take him in tow. Something similar can happen if you do put in at the Priory first, fight your way into the church, but wait to talk to Martin until after you've explored. You may return to the church to find he's vanished. After all, the chapel does offer some diversions. Oleta may be your first main quest, encounter with a trainer, a character who can, for a steep price, bump up one of your skills, in this case restoration. Okay, and then we continue on here. I don't want to continue with Wayne and Priory now. I'm going to save that for a later date. So this is what I look like before Starfield Direct tomorrow. I'm very excited, but it's also really hot in this room thanks to this computer, and it's summer, so I'm going to take a break, and I will come back to this at some other point in time. Okay, it's June 12th, and we officially live in a post-Starfield Direct world. So if you're watching this far later on YouTube, which is in all likelihood the case, just because, you know, as time works, there's an iceberg effect of videos being watched far into the future. So Starfield has not yet come out, and the goal that I've been making of these is to get myself up to speed on what I remember of playing the previous Bethesda games by looking at their guides instead of actually playing the games, just because I think that's a little bit more efficient. And we just had the Starfield Direct, which came from the Xbox Game Showcase, which is sort of the E3 but not E3 of the video game world. And we learned a lot. I think I'm going to withhold my opinions just because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who's going in dark. But it does give me some new methods of looking at these prior games. So we last left off with Kvatch. We recovered Martin, who is the last remaining child, an illegitimate son to Uriel Septim, who has just been assassinated. So a pretty hot beginning when you consider comparison to Morrowind. So one thing we didn't do last time is we didn't really wrap up kind of how I thought about the opening of this game. I made some mention of things, but something else I wanted to talk about was sort of the sense of dynamism and the logic that is going on behind the scenes of this game in comparison to Morrowind. So Morrowind begins with a really, it has innocent beginnings, I would say, in the sense that it's very low-key. You're just delivering a package, and then after that, you're just doing some information collecting, which effectively serves as the exposition of the game, of Morrowind. I did a video of Morrowind before this, so if you want to go back and watch that, you could. For this one, for Oblivion, it's a lot more heated of a beginning, and I think, knowing what I know now, this seems to set a little bit more of the stage for what to expect in the modern Bethesda title. There's a lot more scripting in the sense that NPCs are moving around. They are interacting with the world and with you, the player. They're walking to and from places, which didn't happen in Morrowind. Morrowind was quite static. And that's something I didn't really consider until I thought about what the Kvatch experience was like in Oblivion, which is this pretty incredible assault on an entire town. And the implications of that are really interesting just because when you get there, it's in medias res, it is currently ongoing. And that is something that Morrowind played with a little, but not as often as you might think. So there was one of the tribe Ashlander quests in order to become named Nerevarine. You had to help them find a safe place, so you go to the Daedric Shrine. And when you go to the Daedric Shrine, there is an ongoing conflict. And you can parse out that conflict in a number of ways. But there aren't many moments in the main quest that repeat that scenario. So that is not to say that there isn't a sense of progression in the main quest. I think there totally is. But it's a lot more informational rather than embodied out in the world. As something that you see, that you take in with the senses, something that's not as cognitive, but rather something that's immediate, that's intuitive. So I think that is something of a distinction that I need to make in this opening, is that Kvatch is this huge action set piece where you're looking for Martin, you're trying to quell this uprising, I wouldn't call it uprising, an invasion, I guess, from the Oblivion Gate of these Daedric creatures. And I think that's something that I gave short shrift to in the previous ways that I thought about the games. I love Morrowind, and sometimes in doing so, I dismiss what this game does as not as deep or not as cognitively compelling, but in so doing, I forget sort of the embodied aspects of the animations and the speaking and sort of the action, the weather, how Kvatch presents this mood or this tone that is quite dire. And it does so in a lot of three-dimensional embodied sort of ways. So I don't know, it's really difficult. There is a lot more of a separation in Morrowind between you and the game, and so your imagination fills in those experiences. Oblivion is trying to get closer to that more authentic middle ground where the player does not have to imagine as much, and some people like that more, some people like that less. So it is something to think about as we go through this main quest line compared to Morrowind. So in Wayne and Priory, you've just escorted Martin back to Wayne and Priory, so it's just the trip back from Kvatch. I think you are allowed to fast travel with Martin, if I do recall correctly. I could be wrong. But in any case, if you end up having to make this walk, you will see a couple Oblivion gates. You'll likely see at least one Oblivion gate on your way back, and I think that's intentional. So here we are back at Wayne and Priory, where we saw Joffrey. So we'll continue from there. You arrive back at the Priory to find it under attack by mythic Dawn assassins. The first person you see is the shepherd, Iranor. With an assassin close on his tail, he tells you how he mistook the attackers for travelers, and then suddenly weapons appeared in their hands and Prior Maberol was dead. You're up against it here. Comparatively speaking, these cultists are not as tough as the assassins that took out the Emperor, but there are 5 of them, 3 outside, and 2 in the chapel with Joffrey. and time isn't on your side. It's important to fast travel to the Priory itself rather than to Coral this time. You have to kill the agent chasing Ironor to save your own life, and the 2 attacking Brother Piner near the Priory house to save his. That done, Piner will join you in the chapel in the fight to save Joffrey. Ironor just runs for his life. In the chapel, time again is of the essence. If need be, make yourself the target, interposing yourself between Joffrey and his attackers, and use potions to keep up your health. Use that nice combat scroll you found in Joffrey's chest, and, rather than stowing Martin somewhere safe, let him help. He's a real asset in this fight. Once rescued, Joffrey's thoughts go immediately to the Amulet of Kings. He hid the amulet in a secret room off the Priory Library. Either beat him there, it's supposed to be in the chest, or meet him there to learn the amulet has vanished. Joffrey seems on the verge of despair, until he learns Martin is safe. But where to keep him safe? The monk decides on Cloud Ruler Temple, an ancient blade fortress high in the Jarrell Mountains northwest of Bruma. Your next task is to escort Martin and Joffrey to this hideaway. If Brother Piner survived the battles, he stays at the Priory. You can either fast travel directly to Cloud Ruler Temple, one of the few cases where you can fast travel to a location you haven't previously visited, or take the road from Coral to Bruma, then head north to the fortress. That seems like a good stopping spot, so let's actually see. So Cloud Ruler Temple is up here. So to get there from Wayne and Priory, you could head, through the northeast exit of Coral, up, through along the road here, and then you would eventually you wouldn't take the first exit here, although I suppose you could if you wanted to try and reach some awkward back way, right? Or you could just go here, taking the main road all the way to Bruma, and then just north of Bruma will lead you to Cloud Ruler Temple. Another thing I wanted to say while we've stopped is that they, once again, like the Morrowind guide, they mention an item that you have gotten previously in the main quest, again, as a tool to help you. So I sort of wonder, when the game developers are in liaison with the game guide writers, if that is something that they routinely talked about between the Morrowind and Oblivion games, was the tools that you get from the main quest are almost under the assumption that you are just doing the main quest solely in this moment in time, and that you are to use those items in later portions of the main quest. So what I'm getting at is, do the developers think in isolated terms about their game, where if a person is playing the main quest, they are solely playing the main quest during that period of time, and so they have a view of the player as playing a blocked version of their game, where it's all one faction at a time, it's all one quest line at a time, or do they imagine that the player is playing an interlaced experience where you play a mission in the main quest, and then maybe you go off and you do some faction quests, and then you come back for the main quest again? Because as we've seen with Morrowind was under the assumption that you are an interlaced player, that you do things in between in order to pad out the main quest and to give it the gravitas or the space, so that when you face tougher enemies throughout the main quest, it presents a terraced challenge, and then you rise to meet those challenges by doing other quests. In Oblivion, I am not sure yet. The game design is more leveled to whatever experience you're at, and so maybe the game developers for Oblivion are less certain of if the player will play the main quest at all, and if they do, if they play it all at once under one circumstance. So, having seen the Starfield Direct, I'm very curious to know how the rest of the games respond in this way. And I think it is a central, I wouldn't say qualm, but like a central dynamic that is worth interrogating. Alright, let's move on. When you approach, the great doors open. A blade named Cyrus appears, and Joffrey introduces Martin. The blades at the top of the slope salute him as Martin Septim, and Martin makes a brief halting speech. When it's over, he thanks you for saving his life and confesses he doesn't know what to do. But Martin's instincts are good. For instance, he already knows that these Oblivion gates are unnatural, and he has you and Joffrey to help him find his inner emperor. He'll rapidly embrace his new role. Talk to Joffrey. He thanks you for your services in a more tangible way. You're one word away from joining the Blades. Now the organization of the Blades is not a true faction in the fashion of the fighters, mages, and thieves guilds. Those quests are detailed in the Faction Quests chapter. It's more like a pseudo-faction. There's just the one rank and one set of equipment. You won't find unique blade quests, or, from this point on, the subquests within the main quest function as Blade Quest. Membership confers the right to claim weapons and armor from the Fortress Armory, located below the library in the East Wing. You find most of your kit in a chest, and your complete suit of Blade's armor and an Akaviri longsword, and the missing helmet and extra sets of gauntlets and greaves on the table in the middle of the room. This armor is lighter and offers better protection than the armor you found in Joffrey's chest back at the Priory. However, keep what you can carry of your old armor and sell it off the next time you're in town. The sword's a touch heavier than the claymore, and does slightly less damage, but it's a one-hander, so you can keep a shield or torch equipped at the same time. Martin quickly settles in. You can often find him wandering the library, sitting before the fire in the Great Hall, or sleeping in the nice big bedroom in the West Wing. He's already being treated like a king, and he's starting to act the part, telling you to follow Joffrey's orders while I'm getting oriented around here. That to me seems like a really good stopping point for the player if they wanted to go move on to other things. Like if you wanted to go to do the Fighters Guild or the Mages Guild, or if you wanted to just explore the world, you know, you've pretty much completed the first arc. You have gotten out of the prison, you've made your character, you have seen the inciting incident, and you have followed up on the inciting incident by completing the questions that were asked in the inciting incident, which is, who is this illegitimate son? You have recovered the illegitimate son, and you have brought him, Martin, to safety at Cloud Ruler Temple. So I think at this point, this is a great opportunity for the player to leave and to go do other things. And if they came back, it wouldn't be too crazy to imagine, right? Because there are some narrative conceits for why this might be the case. So you as a player are kind of feeling in over your head, and you want to gain some strength because you've been kind of at your back for a lot of these experiences. And so you as a player want to get stronger. Martin feels overwhelmed and intimidated by what he's being asked to do. He was asked to give an impromptu speech, and he's surprised to find his lineage the way it is, and he's also surprised that he's the leader of Tamriel, as far as I know. You know, his inheritance has arrived, and the Blades respect that blood lineage. So he is going to take some while, as the guide says, to getting settled. So we can be fairly certain that if a player wants to leave, this is the moment. For our circumstances here, since we're just reading the main quest, just to get a sense of how the tone of each of these games is, as well as some of the like design intentions of each game, we're just going to push forward. But I just thought I'd make that comment just because intuitively, as I'm reading this guide, this to me seems like an easy figuring your shit out moment. Moving right along. The Path of Dawn. Everyone seems to agree that the next objective should be the Amulet of Kings. Joffrey doesn't have a concrete plan for its recovery, but he puts you in touch with someone who may have leads to its location. Boris. You remember Boris, right? You accompanied this blade through much of the Imperial prison and its underpinnings. He's now living in Luther Broad's boarding house in the Elven Garden district of the Imperial City. If you walk in the Great Forest, you find some places of interest along the sometimes steep path down from Bruma to Lake Rumer. Bleaker's Way, an odd village of uncommunicative Norns and Dark Elves. It pops up in the Daedric quest Mafala, the massive unmarked cave, and the bandit cave Sursen. Alright, Bleaker's Way, which is, I feel like I don't know much about the draw distances of the game of Oblivion, but if you're on the road, would you be able to see that from there? Possibly. I'm less certain about this. It seems heavily wooded surrounding it, so I wonder if it wasn't the intention to make it that way. The massive unmarked cave here, and the bandit cave Sursen. Okay, yeah, here. The road west and south to the bridge into the capital is marked by a pair of abandoned but not quite empty forts. These are rather like strongholds from Morrowind. Fort Caractacus, I'm so sorry, and the nearby, curiously empty hamlet of Ailswell. Surface in the miscellaneous quest zero visibility. Fort Empire is a big crater dungeon. Not a lot of places that don't have a quest, that are simply just places, right? So there's a lot of utility going on when it comes to locations. We'll have to see if Starfield is that way with its massive setting. If you fast travel into Elven Gardens, you appear just inside the district's exterior walls. Oh god, this is going to be interesting to have to navigate the Imperial City itself. Past the walkway and garden and make a left onto the first street. The boarding house is behind the first door to the northwest. And that is as close as we can zoom in. So is it Luther Broad's boarding house? Is that the one that they said? Yeah. So There we are. You may not recognize Boris out of his armor. He's at the table right in front of you. Talk to him, or simply sit down, and Boris tells you he's being watched. You're to follow the man who's following him. Note that you can't identify the man to whom he's referring. Astav Wilrick. Astav, there's no R, Wilrick. Unless you look around before you sit down. In any case, Wilrick gets up as Boris passes and follows him into the basement. Once downstairs, Wilrick shows his true colors, the red robe and bound mace of a mythic dawn assassin, and takes off after Boris. Just another day in Cyrodiil, right? Help Boris. Unaided, he may not survive. You can start the fight off nicely, in a rather cowardly fashion, by throwing a combat spell into Wilrick's back as he closes with the blade. Then search his body. You find a book, Menkar Cameron's Commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes, Book 1. And Boris now tells you what he's learned. The Emperor's killers are members of a Daedric cult called Mythic Dawn that worships Mehrunes Dagon. Thank you very much, Boris, for your intuitive grasp of the obvious. The real tip, Boris suspects a scholar named Tarmina at Arcane University can tell you more about the book you found. The university is in the southeast corner of the city. If you are a high-ranking member of the Mages Guild, you can find Tarmina in the Mystic Archives. The arena, I'm going to assume, well, there's the Arboretum. Am I going insane? Did I miss something? The Temple of the One. Wow, I'm brilliant. So it's like very southeast, as in like past the Imperial City. So, okay. If you're a hiring member, you can find Tarmina in the middle. Otherwise, she will conveniently be waiting for you in the lobby of the Archmage's Tower, the only part of the university open to the public. It turns out that your book is one of 4 needed to locate the Mystic Dawn's cult secret shrine to Dagon. This is an initiation test for cult novices. Tarmina gives you the library's copy of Book 2 and directs you to a bookstore, first edition, in the city's market district to consult with the owner, Fentius, where to find the remaining 2. The market district is in the city's northeast corner. Fast travel again. I guess that would be faster considering that you have to go through several loading sections if you wanted to get there on foot, which I guess on a PC with like an SSD or an NVMe drive, that would be fairly quick, right? Or almost instant. But back then, I think on the 360, if you were playing on the Xbox, that would have been a little more demanding. First edition is the last door on the left. I'm in the market district. There it is. Kind of hard to see with all these different locations, right? But you can find it right there. There's a lot to talk about with this quest. Okay, there is a stopping spot down there, so I'll wait until I read through a lot of what's happening. Books 3 and 4 are impossible to find, says Fentius. He's never seen Book 4, but it just so happens that he has a copy of Book 3, which he's promised to a customer named of Gwynnis, who's come all the way from the province of Valenwood to collect it. Fentius invites you to stick around and talk to him. The bookseller has just handed you the solution. Buttonhole Gwynnis inside the shop as he's heading for the door and reveal the Mythic Dawn's involvement in the Emperor's murder. Gwynnis now wants nothing to do with the group, and he gives you both Book 3 and a note revealing how to get Book 4 from the sponsor of Gwynnis's Mythic Dawn partnership. Mythic Dawn? I thought it was the Mystic Dawn. Don't wander too far while you're waiting. Once Fentius makes that disclosure, Gwynnis appears in the street outside and heads for the shop. When Gwynnis leaves, he heads for his lodgings in Imperial City. You have to use bribery or speechcraft to sweeten Fentius's mood to a disposition of 60 for the bookseller to reveal that Gwynnis is staying at the Tiber Septim Hotel. The Tiber Septim Hotel is in the Talos Plaza district on the west side of the city, in the southeast portion of the rotunda. I'm just going to search these from now on, I think. Maybe you can see it. Ah, got you. Oh, wow. So, I guess it's difficult to see, or impossible to see, unless you search it. So, it's in there. Southeast portion of the rotunda immediately west, or east, of the entry bridge. Note, you would only need to find Gwynnis at his hotel if you missed his arrival at Fentius' shop, which you could do if you weren't paying attention. Gwynnis is enabled immediately after you first ask Fentius about the Mysterium Xarxes. So if you then leave or don't ask about Gwynnis, you could miss his arrival or not realize his significance until later. If you'd rather skip persuading Gwynnis to hand over Book 3, you can alternately raise Fentius's disposition to 70 when you first inquire about Book 3 and he sells you the book. Earlier protestations of his word being his bond to the contrary. You can even have some fun afterward bragging about this to Gwynnis. Or if you're extremely good at lockpicking, you can steal the book from the store before talking to Fentius. It's in the 4-tumbler chest next to the cellar stairs. In each case, you still have to get the note from Gwynnis. Dude, this quest. As a final alternative, an accomplished pickpocket can steal the book and note from Gwynnis, and an accomplished assassin can simply kill him and take them. Head back to the Elven Gardens district, talk to Boris about the Mythic Dawn meeting and sewers, and then follow him. Apparently the meeting's right now. The blade leads you down into the sewers. He takes the east tunnel, opens a gate leading south to a cistern, and then goes through another into a high-ceilinged chamber that recalls the ones you saw earlier in the sewers below the Imperial prison. Yeah, because it's the same tile set. It's the same textures. Okay, 2 columns. Don't freak out. Let's hope I can actually read these correctly this time. Here you stop to sort out which of you will take point. That is, who will receive the book and who will do backup duty. The point person proceeds through the west door into the sunken sewers, per Gwyneth's note, and sits at the small table. The backup climbs the stairs to the south, enters the same room through the west passage, and keeps watch. It doesn't make much difference which one you choose. Either way, Gwyneth's sponsor, Raven Cameron, arrives out of the darkness and starts a little recruitment speech. 2 more Mythic Dawn cultists appear in an adjoining room. Then, the speech ends prematurely with a fight. Either Boris is recognized as the blade that Wyrick was stalking, or the Mythic Dawn's backup team discovers you've brought backup as well. Gwyneth was told to come alone. Even failure to sit in the chair as ordered gets the cultists riled up. Obeying orders is apparently very big with the Mythic Dawn folks. Yeah, it's a cold. Kill the 3 of them, get the 4th volume of commentaries from Cameron's inventory, and talk to Boris again. He's headed for the fortress to serve under Martin. You're on your own again with a brain teaser to solve. How do you divine the location of the Mayornsdagen shrine from the books? You can solve this yourself without help. At least give it the old Arcane University try. Looking at the books gains you a 1-point boost in each of 4 magical disciplines: Conjuration, Destruction, Illusion, and Mysticism. These are skill books. If you can't figure it out, Boris offers that maybe Tarmina, the scholar who came up with Book 2, can provide more assistance. Leave the sewers the way you entered and pay her another visit at the Arcane University. You have to talk to her 3 times on 3 different days to get the solution. The first 2 conversations results in tips to help you solve it yourself. The first such hint: she suspects the books contain a hidden message, but she wants another day to work on the project, which means you need to wait until after midnight to bug her again. This time, Tarmina suggests that the first word in each paragraph may be the key to the book's meaning, but she wants 1 more day of study. So try your own hand again. The scholar doesn't quite own the solution yet, but has now given you a strong hint. Take the first letter of each paragraph of the 4 books to form a message. Green Emperor Way, where tower touches midday sun. If you still can't see it when you return to the university the following day, Tarmina has sorted it out. She even interprets it for you. Green Emperor Way is an avenue on the palace grounds. Specifically, it's in the palace cemetery. Fast travel to the palace district and you appear on a walkway leading northeast to a flight of stairs. Just before the stairs, turn right and walk over to the large domed tomb. If you highlight the tomb, you learn it is the tomb of Prince Camarel, or Camarel, however you pronounce that. Wait until noon. A glowing map appears on the tomb's door with the Mythic Dawn shrine marked. Check your province map. The destination marker has appeared in the hills west of Lake Arias in eastern Cyrodiil. You don't have to visit Cloud Ruler Temple again to report your success or receive instruction for the next quest. If you do, Joffrey offers his congratulations, and his hope for the future. Boris is back and guarding Martin. Martin offers a new comment on Mayornsdagen's reputed Mysterium Xerxes. Your next move should be obvious. Hit the shrine and get the Amulet of Kings back. Okay, where to begin? So, I like the quest. I think there's a lot going on. There's multiple steps. There's combat, there's intrigue, there's mystery, there's information collecting, the whole 9 yards. And I think that's pretty cool. So, let's start with the beginning step. You go to the bar, or the boarding house, and you meet Boris, and Boris is being followed, and that's a cool feature just because there weren't too many occasions where that happened in Morrowind, and when it did, it was really cheesy, or just really wasn't embellished or robust enough. So there are some repetitions here going on though. So in Morrowind, you go to the city of Vivec to get information similar to this. It's about the 6th house cult, at least some of it. And so here we have the Mythic Dawn cult. So there's some repetitions going on there. Some of the people that you talk to are either worried about their life because they're being accosted, or they are worried that someone is listening in. So you follow them into a more secluded region, in this case, the temple library. So these things are happening here. We are looking for information from Mythic Dawn books. So the second part is you looking for information and talking to people. So you talk to Boris, and then you talk to Tarmina, and from there you talk to a bookseller. So this should be sounding really similar. you go to many bookstores and many libraries throughout the main quest as a way to get you to consider the lore of the world. So if Starfield, for example, had a main quest that took you to a planetary library or some kind of repository of knowledge, I would not be surprised, right? One might say that the main faction, instead of the Blades, it being Constellation as a group of explorers, I happen to think that there's probably going to be a location in Constellation where you can look up information about the world, right? And I think that's smart, just because an astute player or an observing player who wants to take in the world besides just combat is given the opportunity to do so explicitly by the game. The next step is you have to get a hold of some books. So books 3 and 4. And what I love about this is that it seems as though there are multiple ways to do this. It could be the case that some are easier than others. I can't tell based on these descriptions if one is a dominant strategy. It just seems like going through the main quest motions, there is a speech check. So maybe that's an easy way to get a hold of it for some characters, whereas, lockpicking and stealing the book may be easier for another, unless there's a guard nearby. That could be just as good of an option. And then some combat at the end. And something that I noticed here at the end was that, or I guess the penultimate aspect of this quest, so the second to last step, is that in a lot of the fighting that the character has been doing so far in the game, you have always been aided by allies. So when the Emperor is leaving, there are his guards, and you really don't have to fight those enemies if you want to, although you do have to fight the smaller rats, but that's more of a tutorial, so the intention is that you fight. When you fight in Kvatch, you do have people on your side, though occasionally you're left on your own to explore in order to present the tone that it wants, which is this kind of haunting horror tone of you being in this stranger in a strange land. And then Wayne and Priory, you're fighting with Martin and with Joffrey and with the other brothers. And then here, when you're underground, you have some assistance. So I think compared to something like Arkanthand from the Morrowind quest, where you're just on your own having to recover an object and you have to fight 3 or 4 mercenaries at one time, I think this game is a little bit more minute in its gradations for onboarding the player into combat and into the world. So take that for what you will. I think that's pretty smart, considering that the combat is a little different than Morrowind, but actually, conversely, a little bit more intuitive for what a player who's not used to these kinds of games would expect. Is there anything else I wanted to say? Patrician TV, I think, makes a lot of negative connotations towards this mark, suggesting that ordinary people would see this in the middle of the day. I think it's just a nice way to have a puzzle. I'd be curious if people, when playing this, attempted to solve the riddle on their own by looking at the books before waiting for Taormina. And even with the Green Emperor way, where tower touches midday sun, I wonder if that was easy to pinpoint in the capital. So I don't know. I've never done it. Maybe someone has, but I've just waited for Taormina to kind of give me direction on what to do next. I will be curious if riddles have existed in Morrowind and Oblivion. I'll be curious to see if riddles exist in Starfield. I would be curious to look at the Fallout games to see how riddles and puzzles are done in those games, if at all, because I get the sense that Starfield, it leans, at least content-wise, on the side of Fallout. Tone-wise, I'm not sure. Tone-wise, it seems to fall certainly not in the tongue-in-cheek way of Fallout. So maybe more Elder Scrolls as far as like this sentimental reverence in Starfield of the kind that you see in Elder Scrolls. So that's that quest. I like it. I think it's cool. I'm sure there are a lot of flaws when you actually play it, but here on paper, I'm impressed with the number of steps. I'm impressed with the options. I'm impressed with the information gathering. I'm maybe not so much impressed with the amount of repeating concepts or themes from Morrowind that exist here. I didn't realize just how much DNA translated from Morrowind into Oblivion. Not so much in form, but just in the content. So I'll be curious to see if that continues. So let's move on to the Dagon Shrine. Your path into eastern Cyrodiil winds through rather desolate and, toward the end, difficult terrain. Retrace your route along the north coast of Lake Rumere. Oh, that's right, we're heading towards the shrine. North coast of Lake Rumere, and this time continue east at the bandit camp Sursen. After you pass the tumble-down Roxy Inn, the path begins to turn south. Head east-northeast cross-country, and you hit Fort Shaman, now an undead dungeon, Exhausted Mine, now a goblin lair, and up in the hills, the farmhouse Harm's Folly, which plays into the settlement quest Revenge Served Cold. See the miscellaneous quests chapter for details on settlement quests. Then there's nothing for a long stretch until you reach the shrine on the far side of the mountains. The slopes east of the farm can be prohibitively steep, and you may need to detour north or east to reach the cave. A body of water, and then the Lake Arius Caverns. Here we are. So all in all, we've how do I put this? I feel as though we've traveled so much more of this world. So like here, just to give you an overall idea, we've gone from the Imperial City to Wayne Priory, to Kvatch, back to Wayne Priory, to the Imperial City, to Cloud Ruler Temple, back to the Imperial City, back to Cloud Ruler Temple if we want, or we can just go straight to the shrine. So when you look at the total look of the map as a whole, that's a lot of territory to have crossed in such a short amount of time. To give you an idea, so in Vivec, which the quest that I think of the informants, the 3 informants that you find in Vivec, I think is a good parallel to the quest we just did. You've never left the southwest portion of the world. The exploring that you do of the rest of the world happens at a much later time. So a couple reasons for why you might be doing so much more back and forth. One is obvious, which is fast travel. 2 is that the game developers are a lot more confident in sending the player wherever they want them to go because of the leveled content. So if the game levels with you wherever you go, they don't have to worry about sending you into territories where there are higher level enemies. I don't know how I feel about that. Certainly a lot of the mystery of the world goes away quickly if you realize that in this short amount of time you have effectively gone cross-country over the entire map. I'm surprised at how much territory you cross throughout this early part. So just as a gut reaction, if you're curious to know, to me that's surprising. Anyway, let's move on to Lake Arius Caverns. I do not remember playing that phase. Inside, you can play it one of 2 ways, undercover or commando. You can give the countersign to the doorkeeper at the bottom of the first passage and wait for him to unlock the first door, or butcher him and take his key. Nice touch. In the next room, you can turn over your possessions to the shrine warden, Harrow, and allow him to lead you to the shrine for your initiation, or you can refuse and send him to join his buddy. If you killed the doorkeeper, you will have to fight Harrow, and everyone in the shrine will be hostile as soon as you start a fight with anyone. Undercover is the way to go for a low-level character. It gets you all the way into the inner shrine with no one the wiser. Fighting instantly blows your cover. Word of the attack spreads like wildfire, and you have to kill pretty much everybody in the antechamber to reach the shrine. You've seen what Mythic Dawn guys are like when they transform into warriors, and that can be too much for a low-level character. You don't have to hand over all your stuff to Harrow, though. Find some flat ground in the shrine's first room and dump everything you can before you talk to Harrow. If you dump your stuff outside, you can watch it tumble down the steep mountainside in a lovely demonstration of the game's physics engine. Okay, well, something that the game did that backfired. Alas, you can't drop your gold. Consequently, any gold carried to this encounter is forfeit, at least for the moment. Either invest it in equipment, potions, and spells before you leave, or return after you're done and take it back. Once again, there's a lot of maps. The Morrowind guide did not have this much land space in the guide given over to maps. I find that surprising. They assume that the complexity of these places is quite a lot more than in Morrowind, and that may be so, but they don't seem that much more. They seem quite linear, sometimes some offshoots, which is to be expected in role-playing games, almost encouraged. So if you want to read those things, you're kind of on your own, and I apologize for that, but I don't want to overstay my welcome. When you enter the shrine, you hear cult leader Mankar Cameron's speech. It serves both as confirmation of Boris's earlier intelligence of Mythic Dawn's involvement in the assassinations, and as a statement of intent for future campaigns. The time of cleansing draws nigh, he declares. I go now to paradise. I will return with Lord Dagon at the coming of the dawn. And so he does, taking the Amulet of Kings with him, but not the Mysterium Xarxes, which rests beside a sacrificial dagger on the podium at the west end of the dais. And that's the Oblivion symbol, which is a nice touch. So the textures compared between Morrowind and Oblivion, we're entering into the realm of high definition screens. In 2005, I think that was a rarity. So I don't think we're kind of just on the uphill slope of it right now. I do remember some friends around this time who were playing games like Dead Rising on high definition screens, which were like 720, basically higher than the 480 cathode ray tube televisions that we had come to expect. So I don't remember doing that for a while with Oblivion. It took me a long time to get a high definition screen. So, and in fact, I'm doing this on 1080p. So I've always preferred to be one step behind, so as to save money. I guess I'm a cheapskate. Speak to Bruma, Cameron, Mankar's daughter, and she orders you to kill the victim laid out on the altar. Tough decision. With the death of Julius, your escape from the shrine will be somewhat easier. By killing him, you've proved yourself, and Bruma, Cameron, and the acolytes at the base of the dais will disperse, but you've gone undercover to slam the door to Oblivion and save innocent lives, not take them. Truth be told, you're not going to be able to just stroll out of the shrine with the Mysterium Xarxes under your arm in any case. Saving Julius won't make it that much harder. The alarm will go off, and releasing him just makes it go off with enemies in closer proximity. Save him. Simply refusing to kill him is not enough. Grab the book and run all out for the stairs to the north. He follows you outside the shrine and makes his way back to the Imperial City. You find him back at his duties. He's a priest in the Temple District later in the game. That's strange. I guess the quest sort of makes a diamond effect, right, where you do have the chance to sneak in or to pass as a Mythic Dawn initiate, but either way, you're going to have to either kill everybody or you're going to have to just take the book and run. Not really a fan of that. Do you actually get the chance to kill Julius if you wanted to like prove, like, could you go so deep undercover that it becomes like The Departed, where you're so far down that you don't know what up looks like? I don't know. Who cares? All right. You can't leave as you entered. A locked gate now blocks this path to the shrine's antechamber. Happily, a second exit on the north side of the room's upper tier is open, and the comparative safety of a separate antechamber is only a short way up the tunnel. Here the enemy mood runs more to panic than outrage. Your impulse is probably to obey your journal entry and cart the book back to Martin pronto. But now that you are suited up again, you can nip back into the shrine using the secret exit and do some looting, including reclaiming any gold or personal property that Harrow liberated from you earlier. Harrow should still be in the shrine. You have to kill him to recover your gold. Another good source of loot is through the lower door of that pillared room where we shook off the pursuers. However, reaching Harrow and getting out alive may not be a simple task, even with your reclaimed equipment. If you ran from the scene, there are still packs of Mythic Dawn guards and acolytes, not to mention Bruma, Cameron, roaming the intervening antechamber in the shrine itself. The longer you're here, the greater the chance they'll catch up to you and try to kill you. Back at Cloud Ruler Temple, talk to Martin and turn over the book for decryption. He expects it will reveal how to open a portal to Cameron's paradise and hints to recovery of the amulet. That's going to take a while. In the meantime, Martin refers you to Joffrey to see a report of spies in Bruma. Okay, so that seems to me like another cycle, I guess we could call them. So we've done this arc of information gathering, and that led us to this shrine. And we have another book, but that book will take time. So because of that, it gives you another exit point out of the quest. Sure, there are spies, but those spies, if it's more based on intrigue, intrigue is not disaster, and espionage is not necessarily disaster, right? So I think there is a little bit of a dynamic push and pull here, where the game pushed you into these previous two quests, and now it is pulling you back out and saying, okay, you can, if you want to go do other things, you can. So it's not mentioned explicitly like, hey, go away, go do things. What they basically say is like, it's going to take a while to figure out what this book means. I like that it's information gathering. Not so hot on the amount of combat that you're doing all the time, it seems like. Combat was, I will say this about Morrowind, is that the I spent more time in combat on the way to locations, I feel, than I did in locations. So fighting cliff racers, fighting the local wildlife of Morrowind, or fighting any mercenaries on the way. So combat was part of the journey, and it wasn't so concentrated in the destination. And that may be the case here. But I get the sense, I kind of want to try it for myself, but I get the sense that in this world, there's a lot more fighting as a ratio at the destination than on the journey there. So anyway, back to Cloud Ruler Temple. Oh shit, I think I moved it too much, and I think I broke its destination. Yeah, I'm gonna have to refresh it. Sorry about that. Spies. Moving right along. How far are we in the main quest? I don't know. Is this like 20%? Is this 30%? Cloud Ruler Temple may not be quite as safe or secret as the Blade's Grandmaster once thought. The temple's gate guards have reported seeing strangers on the road for the past several nights. Joffrey can't mobilize the Blades for a general search of the mountainside without risking the fortress's security, but he can send you out to spy on the spies. He suggests you talk to Blade Captain Stefan and Captain Bird and Bruma at the base of the mountain. Depending on the time of day, Stefan can be found patrolling the walls, guarding Martin, eating in the library, or sleeping. He tells you the strangers usually appear at dusk near a rune stone down the rocky slope. Rune stones are discussed in the Freeform Quests chapter. Wow, there's a gate to Oblivion right there from Bruma. Is that part of the main quest? That seems awfully close. Bird can be found either in the Great Hall of Castle Bruma or the adjoining barracks. He hasn't noticed strangers in town. Indeed, with the Oblivion crisis, he says there hasn't been much travel lately, apart from Jural's recent trip up from the south. These two referrals set up alternate and mostly separate approaches to cracking the case. One involves surveillance, the other a concerted investigation in Bruma, and some stage, each will involve fighting. At some point, at some stage. What was the point of this phrase? Each will involve fighting. Joffrey wants the spies dead, and he wants to know what they know. Okay. So are there two different ways to do this quest? Well, this seems pretty cool. I'm getting some looking up in the lighthouse down at Fargoth and Sedanine vibes from the surveillance. I don't remember doing this. I must have, but I don't remember a single part of this. I'm glad I'm looking at the guides. Their surveillance part is fairly basic. Before 7 p.m., take up a position on the large snow-covered rock partway down the slope south of the fortress road. Those guards must have eyes like eagles. The fortress itself is a bit too far away to serve as a useful vantage point. Fix your gaze to the south and wait. Shortly after 7 p.m., two figures approach a runestone just east of the low hill to the south. You won't see the two doing any actual spying, but their presence here is certainly suspicious. Maintain a careful distance. At 10 p.m., you can track them back to a cave entrance, Bruma Caverns, southwest of the city. This leads to a door to the basement of Jural's house in the city's southwest corner. If you can pick the lock, you can put a beating on the Mythic Dawn spies, Jural and Severi Faram. If you can't pick the locks, let the spies spy you. They morph into Mythic Dawn warriors and attack against their orders as it happens. Kill them. Ultimately, you're going to have to kill them anyway. You find keys to the cave door and trapdoor on their bodies. Jural also has the keys to her house. But where's the intelligence officer Joffrey asked you to collect? On a table in the cellar is a note from Ruma Cameron that lays out the enemy's operations and future plans in frightening detail. The Mythic Dawn Order already knows Martin is at Cloud Ruler Temple, and the fortress's destruction is now a priority. The spies, Jural and Severi Faram, who are identified by name, are looking into what Martin's doing there, and his potential escape routes. The Mythic Dawn doesn't want a repeat of Kvatch. The agents have also been active outside Coral. The first explicit hint is that a gate has already appeared there, and plans calling for the opening of a great gate at Bruma. The Order is also interested in you, probably more now than when the note was written. Okay, that's one way to do the quest. Pretty cool. Let's see, you get to oversee and then you get to sneak up on somebody, so it's a far more stealth-oriented quest. I like how it's doing two things. So it's taking up that new technology that the game wants, as far as characters who can walk around, and then characters who have timelines. So clearly for this quest, I think once you start it, these characters don't exist until the quest begins, and then they appear and they have a cycle. And there's the hope that as a player you'll be able to catch them in this cycle, and that makes the world feel believable, even though these characters appear just for this quest and then disappear because you disappear them, because you kill them. But it helps to prepare and do a handoff for the information between the game and the next set of quests. It gives the feeling that the Mythic Dawn is a lot more powerful, even though, you know, this is a computer game and these are digits and it's all pixels, and there's power doesn't exist anywhere in here unless the game wants characters to have power. So I think it's cool. I think it is cool because it ups the stakes. It's an upping the stakes experience. You know, the Mythic Dawn is a lot stronger than we realized. Mayor Dagon is not desperate but aggressive, that sort of thing. So let's see how the intelligence won. Let's assume you missed the window for tracking the spies today and don't feel like wasting a day waiting. Then head for Bruma and Captain Bird. Jurl is a local, but her name is the only hard detail you have. However, when you talk to Bird, your journal suggests you have a chat with Jurl. Jurl never leaves her house, which remains locked all day long, making your task difficult. Trying to pick her lock gets you fined by the town guard. You need more than the circumstantial evidence to break into a house with impunity. Can someone provide hard info on Jurl? A survey of residents turns up a lot of interesting local problems, all outside the capacity of this chapter, but only one comment about Jurl, and it raises suspicions without providing probable cause. Regner, who lives several houses to the east, says Jurl stays inside all the time. If you put the strangers in town question to Jorik, the outcast, a beggar who wanders Bruma, he says his memory sometimes ain't what it used to be. With 5 pieces of gold, you can jog his memory. Jorik now recalls seeing someone he'd never seen before looking out Jurl's window when Jurl herself wasn't home. In fact, 2 of Jurl's neighbors can offer similar tips. Ongar, the world-weary across the street, and Arnora to the east have heard Jurl talking to someone. And, like Jorik, Ongar's seen someone at the window. But they talk only if you belong to the Thieves Guild, or if you ratchet the speaker's disposition up to 60. Raise their dispositions by playing the persuasion minigame, or by charming them. Why is charming? I guess they want you to see that this is the noun, the physical charm that you can cast, instead of the verb, the lowercase charming, just as one progressive verb. And I don't know, like, I get why they do that, but I still think that's kind of silly. Moreover, Ongar's door is also locked, and picking attempts produce the same swift response from the authorities. Ongar's only here from 6 a.m. to noon, and you can find him taking his meals at Olav's Tap and Tack or wandering the city for the rest of the day. You now have your probable cause. Bring this information to Bird's attention, and he authorizes a search of Jurl's home. You still have to pick the lock on the door and then another lock on the trap door to the cellar, where you find Ruma Cameron's note. If you can't master both locks, your only recourse is to track down the spies themselves, as described in the surveillance section above, and take their keys. Report back to Joffrey, who says he'll contact Bruma's countess to report the threat to the city. He bumps you over to Martin for a progress report on his decryption of the Mysterium Xerxes. Okay, so the game provides some explicit time to give to Martin with this. You could call it like just babysitting quest, but I don't feel it's that. I think it does a good job of addressing the Mythic Dawn cult in a way that's mostly outside of combat, and I like that. I like how you had to do some investigation here, and I'm looking forward to more of that in the future. If Starfield isn't limited to, storage space, it's 125 gigabytes in size, so hopefully some of that space will be used for investigative stuff like this that can't exist in the game. That's pretty thrilling. Are they going to come out with a strategy guide for Starfield? That would be a very large thing indeed. Games are getting so big that the Elden Ring guide has 2 volumes. I like that there are 2 wholly different ways of doing this quest, and that it's literally the diamond, right? So there are 2 possible points, and then it comes back. It all coalesces into the same outcome. So, like, it's just, in my opinion, it's good so that, people that, groups of people who are playing still get this strange multiplayer feeling experience where they share stories. And maybe one person did the intelligence route where they asked around, and maybe another person, in an ideal world on paper, this is what you want in a role-playing game. You want people to have differing experiences for the same thing. It's just in Bethesda games, a lot more of it is structured for you compared to a tabletop experience for sure. But even some role-playing games nowadays are a lot less hand-holdy. Still, it's cool, Blood of the Daedra. Actually, I am gonna sort of cheat a little bit. I want to see how far the main quest is. So many maps. It's just constant maps. The amount of text that you're actually reading is a lot smaller. I may be through this a lot faster. Okay, faction quests, the Fighters Guild. That occurs on page 136, which means that it ends on 135. I was a little past page 100, or right at. So we've got 35 pages to get through with all those big maps. So where did we start with the main quest? 70. Oh, wow. Okay, so the implication of that is that we are, oh my god, stop Microsoft Edge, get wrecked. The implication of that is just on paper alone that we are halfway through the main quest, which is sort of shocking when I think about how much time I've put into this one, which is not a lot. Okay, food for thought. Let's move on, but Blood of the Daedra. Back to Cloud Ruler Temple, because we have to talk to Martin about this book. Just as Cameron bound himself to the evil book Mysterium Xarxes to create his paradise, so can Martin bind himself to it to create a portal into that realm. But he needs your help to secure the materials for this ritual. So far, he's identified only one, the blood of a Daedra lord infused in a Daedric artifact. Ask Martin about Daedric artifact to learn. These can be obtained through the cults devoted to the various Daedra lords, and that the book Modern Heretics offers a good account of the cults. The temple's library has a copy. Cool. I love this. I love that the game sends you to read books. Like, I'm a simp for books, so note that his language is a little artful here. Martin means the temple has a copy, not that it's physically in the East Wing Library. It's on Martin's table in the Great Hall unless you've already taken it. Oops. Read Modern Heretics, a study of Daedra worship in the Empire, to learn the location of the Shrine of Azura. Your journal suggests a visit to this shrine to learn how to acquire such a Daedric artifact, and a map marker shows the shrine's location. See Azura and the Daedric quest chapter for details. Yeah, that would be a terrible idea if you used Azura's star. It's routinely one of the better items. It's reusable, and it allows you to enchant items. I think Patrician TV talked about that, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but that's madness. On the surface, this all looks fairly straightforward, but this is one tricky quest. The book, if you actually read it, and you are reading the book, right? So pedantic. The guide that you're reading is under the impression that you, the player, are not reading the book, and I guess that's fair. A lot of players probably wouldn't. Also mentions other Daedra lords and their artifacts. Hersign the Huntsman, the Nemesis in Morrowind's Blood Moon expansion, and his artifact, Saviour's Hide Armor, Malakath and the Hammer Volendrung, and Molag Bal and the Mace of Molag Bal. Other Daedra lords, their shrines and worshippers remain to be discovered in Cyrodiil by earnest and persistent researchers. The book's text reads, in fact, any of the game's 15 Daedric artifacts will do for this quest. Which one should you collect for Martin's ritual? Please give us a better option than Azura Star. Here's more information to help you choose your artifact. To help you choose your artifact. Oh God, sorry. What the hell? Guys, proofread. Hope you chose your artifact. If convenience and speed are paramount, you can fast travel to Azura's Shrine or possibly the Sanguine Shrine. You pass the latter if you walk to Kvatch, possibly others too if you've explored significantly on your own. 2 more shrines, Nemir's Shrine east of Bruma, Hermaeus Mor's Shrine far west of the Blades Temple, and the mountains near the Skyrim line are within easy walking distance far west of the Blades Temple. Oh yeah, Okay. But proximity is a deceptive virtue. You typically need an offering of ingredients to summon the Daedric Lords, and many of the required ingredients are hard to come by for a low-level character. The monsters that yield them appear only when the player has reached higher levels. So what do you do if you're still small potatoes? Some alchemists stock the ingredients, but figuring out which ones may be a long-term enterprise. The ingredients may turn up in general clutter, but again, they are rare, and naturally, they probably won't be there when you go looking for them. Shops don't have fixed inventories like loot. Shop inventories are drawn from large collections of items that reflect the player's current level. Wow. Oblivion is really dynamic in that way. That is... How do I feel about that? I did not know that. And I don't know. If you've come to rely on certain stocks and certain inventories from places, and then you get to a certain level threshold and realize that some of it changes, maybe it doesn't matter. Like, I don't know. I didn't realize that the game was so dynamic with each level. It wasn't just enemies. And it also the inventories of the shops. If you want an easy quest, go to Nocturnals and Hersign's Shrines. It's a long trip to the Nocturnal Shrine, even if you first travel to Imperial City. The shrine is east of the midsection of the Lower Aneben, and is open for business only at night. You don't have to supply anything up front to get the quest. And the mission itself involves only a nominal amount of mayhem and quite a lot of sneaking about and eavesdropping. Hersign's Shrine is much closer, straight south from the Imperial City's southeastern extremity, on a hilltop in thick woods south of the Sweetwater camp. The offering, a wolf or bear pelt, isn't hard to find, and the mission, kill a unicorn, shouldn't be a stretch. One last consideration. Each of these quests yields an artifact that you might put to good use yourself. If you give it to Martin, you throw it away, albeit to a good cause. So are any artifacts clearly expendable? Martin seems to think so. He offers a unique comment on each when you turn it over. For example, he says that the Wabbajack staff you collect from the Sheogorath's Shrine's mission is a stuff of mischief. You might think otherwise. This staff, which changes the target into a random creature, is an excellent way to bring a tough enemy down to size. Use it against an easier one, though, and it may have the opposite effect. The Wabbajack. A reference to Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, if I'm not too mistaken. In the big picture, they're all useful, but in the smaller one of an individual game, usefulness is relative to how you play. If you're a blunt weapons guy, the sword gold brand may not impress you. A blade mistress may look askance at the hammer Volendrung. If you're not much of an enchanter, a reusable soul gem like the Azura Star isn't likely to rise far above your horizon. For more information on each quest, see the Daedric Quests chapter. Okay. So I didn't necessarily need to read that, but so I would consider this padding. It's not really a main quest. It's using a Daedric quest in the main quest economy. Now, on the one hand, it's cool that the main quest reveals explicitly that Daedric quests exist, because I think a lot of players coming into Bethesda games may not know that about the Elder Scrolls universe, that the Daedric gods can communicate with you in such a way that you can perform a task for them and receive a kind of legendary item. In these games, these weapons can be quite epic, and so that loot is really important. I think more so it's the coolness of the quests. Oftentimes in Elder Scrolls games, the Daedric quests are quite fun. They can be quite random or silly. They can be quite dark, and they have certain implications about the world. And so I think for that reason, more so than the loot, is a good reason why I would do these Daedric quests. So I appreciate that the game is using this as an opportunity to introduce Daedric quests, but I also think it is a way to pad out the runtime of the main quest to make it feel longer. I don't know. So it's equivocal. It's not an all good outcome for this quest. There are some caveats. So I can't say that I like the quest, but on the other hand, I do understand why they did it. Blood of the Divines. By the time you turn over the Daedric artifact to Martin, He's figured out the second item required for the portal ritual. The blood of a god. Joffrey suggested the blood of the Emperor Tiber Septim, a mortal who became divine as Talos. Martin suggests you ask him where to find it. Security-minded Joffrey has another mission foremost in his mind. As forecast in Ruma Cameron's note from the spy's quest, an Oblivion gate has appeared outside Bruma. Okay, so it is part of the main quest. And he asks you to show Captain Bird and his town guard how to close it. However, if you then ask after the armor of Tiber Septim, he steers you to a relic from the reign of Tamriel's first emperor. Note: the Bruma Gate and Blood of the Divine quests run in parallel. It doesn't matter which one you do first. We tackle Blood of the Divines here and the Miss Karkind quest that follows because of the Blood of the Daedra. They make up a sequence of ritual quests. Look for the Bruma Gate section later in the chapter. Okay, that's interesting. So they're playing around with order in the Morrowind quests, as you know. Or if you don't know, the player has to get approval from the three houses of Morrowind and the 4 Ashlander tribes, and they are welcome to do this in any order. So we might say that those are quests in parallel. You can make progress with some over others. You can complete them systematically, 3 houses, 4 Ashlander tribes, or any combination thereof. And that is pretty neat, I think, for the middle of the game, but also quite intimidating because the game doesn't necessarily tell you exactly where to go and what to do. It seems like here this is a little bit more structured. There's only 2 quests in parallel. I do appreciate when this happens. I don't ever recall this happening in Skyrim or the Fallout games. I could be wrong. In fact, I probably am wrong, but that's just my gut reaction. After his victory at Sancretor, Septim made a present of his bloody gear to the Blades. The Blades built a shrine around the cuirass deep in those catacombs, and in the years that followed, the location where Septim received the blessings of the god Akatosh became a mecca for blade pilgrims. Then an unspecified evil settled in Sancretor. It claimed the 4 mightiest blades of Septim's time. Note their names: Elaine, Valdemar, Voldemort, Realis, and Kasner. And Joffrey says it has been centuries since a visitor has returned from the shrine. Why do they do this? Why do they have 2 lines here? Just finish it off and he leaves you with the key to Sancretor's outer door, and he fears he is sending you to your death. Quite a lot of pages given over to maps. I don't know how I feel about that. Joffrey has never said anything quite like that before. Then again, in the main quest, you've never before visited a place quite like Sancretor. Sancretor is a sprawling undead dungeon still bent to the evil will of a departed entity. Among other things, this means ghosts and wraiths, and that in turn calls for a magic weapon, something the main quest hasn't thrust into your hands up to this point. Any of the Dremora weapons from the Kvatch Oblivion Gate will do, if you happen to pick one up. If you don't have a magic or silver weapon yet, quest independently for one before you set out on this mission. Does the game tell you that? You've probably passed fairly close to Sancretor on your way northeast to Cloud Ruler Temple. On your way southwest across foothills and forest, you pass the Aelid ruin called Riel and the small waterlogged boreal stone cave, whose lone inhabitant figures in the miscellaneous quests of Brotherhood betrayed in the Critter Lair Sideways Cave. Sancretor's entrance is in the southeast interior corner of a decaying keep. Am I going to be able to see it from this? Oh, okay. Quite large. I'm getting Kagranak vibes from this place, which was kind of the first big fortress that you fought enemies in. It's a definite, combat heavy dungeon. Okay, so that travel seems... I can't tell. There are some moments when fast travel seems like it was intended, and then there are some times when it's not. So, this seems very manageable, who's to say? North of the tree line along a rough plateau, at a break in the mountains, the exterior entrance to the keep itself is in its southwest corner. The armor isn't that far into the dungeon, off the entry hall, which serves as a hub for Sancretor's 6 sections, and the tomb of the Riemann Emperors, but you can't reach it. A 4-stage magical barrier blocks the way. By the time you reach the barrier, you may have already made a start at removing it. Spread around the dungeon are 4 undead skeletons, blade skeletons. You must defeat them all. One's in a large chamber near the bottom of the initial section of Sanctuary. The others are in the Hall of Judgment, the prison, and the catacombs, all of which can be reached from the entry hall. The Hall of Judgment and the catacombs are also connected directly. It doesn't matter which blade you tackle first. After you defeat each skeleton, the ghost of the respective blade appears and fills in some of the specifics to the broad story. The four were sent by Tiber Septim to learn what had invaded the catacombs. They discovered, too late, that it was the Underking, Septim's former imperial battle mage, Zurin Arctus. Arctus was determined to have his revenge on the Emperor, and claimed it here by blocking those who would visit Sanctuary to honor Septim and forcing the Emperor's servants to an endless defense of the defiled shrine. The Underking himself is long gone, but the undead blades are still in its grip. However, once you defeat their undead incarnations in combat, they join up to break the lingering spell that blocks your access to the tomb. Then you can claim the armor. Wear it, too, if you like. It's a nice, if unenchanted, heavy chestplate. Alas, you don't get to keep it. Give the armor to Martin, and he removes the needed blood, puts on the armor himself, and gives you another quest. Yeah, what else is there to say that? So these sort of quests like Kagranak or Sanctuary are some of my least favorite in main quests. I know they do it for a reason, which is to get the feeling that you have entered into a higher level and that you're ready to take on newer challenges. I think I prefer the first half of a main quest to the second half because of this. Because the first half of that main quest is where the mystery is, it's where the questions are dominant, it's where information gathering is heaviest. I don't have anything to say about this. Cool. Great Welkin Stone. The third item required for the portal ritual is a Great Welkin Stone, a magical artifact found in the ruins of an Aelid? Have I been pronouncing that correctly? Aelid capital at Miskarkend. This is the first explicit reference to the Aelid people in the main quest. Interesting. I don't remember the Aelid people at all. So I should probably read this subsection. Note, Morrowind had the dwarves. Oblivion had the Aelids. A dead civilization, founded in time immemorial, whose artifacts are in demand by collectors, enchanters, researchers, and emperors to be. Man, the repetitions between Morrowind and Oblivion are in the double digits. You'll be sent out several times in Oblivion to retrieve them, notably in the miscellaneous quests, the Collector, Nothing You Can Possess, and the Secrets of the Aelids. Just as you could instantly identify the rusted Dwemer towers in Morrowind, you can recognize the gleaming Romanesque ruins of the Aelids. To date, you've seen at least 3, Windir in the deep woods southwest of Wind Priory, Riel, and Miskarkend itself. If you walked from the Priory to Kvatch, you probably found Miskarkend along the Skingrad-Kvatch road. Glories and Laments Among the Aelid Ruins, a travel guide on Martin's work table in the temple's Great Hall, deals with another site, Saya Tatar, in the forest between Skingrad and Imperial City. In its images of decay, it hints at the elegance and sophistication of the Aelid civilization, though not its brutality. Cool. Referencing a book. A book is available on the subject. None of this is required for the mission, but if you want to learn more about the Aelids, check out The Last King of Aelids at, among other places, Imperial City's first edition bookstore, on Wild Elves and Arcane University's Mystic Archives and the Amulet of Kings and the library at Cloud Ruler Temple. Wow. Even more opportunities for reading. I didn't read books so much in Oblivion. I was in high school. I wasn't in a book reading phase. I gave up reading after middle school. So pretty much 9th through the end of 11th grade, I was not reading. I picked it up again senior year, but the deepest regrets of my life. You shouldn't have too much trouble in Miskarkend. The enemies. Let's get there first. So where is this in relation to? Oh, yeah, it's right next to Kvatch. Enemies, mainly goblins, zombies, and skeletons, are manageable, the loot satisfying, and the path down to the Cell, Vanau, and Moramath sections in its Great Welkin Stone uncomplicated. Just stay on the main path. Most of the time, it's on high ground. The king and a couple of his pals appear from a hidden enclosure on your way out, but the fight can be surprisingly quick, so long as you close quickly with this son of a lich. Nice. And the hideaway even provides you with a speedier way up and out. Back to Cloud Ruler Temple. That's the end of the ritual quests for now. Yeah, effectively a set of fetch quests, but Todd Howard likes main or fetch quests because he thinks that it gives the player options for how exactly to fetch. So is that always the case? I don't think that is so, unless you get these Great Welkin Stones from multiple places. It looks as though you could. I suppose Miskarkend is the easiest. The fourth component remains elusive. It's true love. Martin doesn't know what it is, and we won't know until you complete 2 missions. that relate to the defense of Bruma. If you haven't completed Bruma Gate, Martin directs you to do so now. If you have, see Joffrey, who sends you off on a massive expedition called Allies for Bruma. Allies for Bruma. Is that the Nerevarine Hortator parallel? I just want to make sure I didn't skip anything. No, these are all maps. All right, the Bruma Gate. All right, so here's the second quest in the 2 parallel quests that you can do. Do I have anything to say about the fetch quests? No, I think I've made enough comments leading up to that. Man, we are flying through some of these. You get to run a training mission. An Oblivion Gate has opened before Bruma. You're the one who closed one of these things at Kvatch. Now you're to instruct Captain Bird and his men on Oblivion Gate closing procedures, meaning you're going to close it for them while they watch your back. How... shouldn't they go in with you so that they can see what they're getting their hands into? Or what they're getting so that they know how to do it in the future? Like, so that they're just going to sit there on the outside and wait? How is that training? Hopefully they go with you, right? Surely they do. The gate shimmers southeast of the city. You can enter and do a reconnaissance if you wish. However, this plan will probably be brief and bloody. The Daedra assembled on the other side, an array that is increasingly Dremora-oriented as you rise in level, may just eat you alive. Better to wait, enlist the aid of Bird and 2 of his 5 town guardsmen, who can be found outside the town gate, and go in together. Okay, thank God. I'm not crazy. They actually go with you. Like, that would have been insane. So good. I think that's cool. That way the Daedra assembled on the far side can eat them alive. That's a joke. You need to watch the guards' backs just as it is hoped watch yours. If they die, you may die. Try to hasten this process by hitting them instead of the Daedra. As you move, I feel like I do remember this. I feel like I do remember this moment. As you move counterclockwise around a U-shaped island, toward another of those great gray towers, home to the sigil stone that anchors the Bruma Gate, your quartet faces a swarm of Daedra. The exact composition of this happy mob will vary a good deal depending on your current level, but you're going to see a lot of Dremora. If you're getting clobbered here, read it as a signal to come well prepared with potions, ramp up your weapons and armor, and level up in side quests before you try it again. I gotta say, I don't like the amount of combat. It's very combat heavy, the past couple quests. You find the tower similar to the one reached via the Kvatch Gate, with one important difference. Chance plays a greater role in exactly how things play out. Many of the Daedra may or may not appear. You face numerous enemies in and out of the citadel on your way to the top, to the Dremora Sigil Keeper, this one at the top of the citadel, and this sigil stone. When it's over, you get Bird's gracious thanks and perhaps too blasé assurance that he and his men can tackle things in the future. Here the ritual and Bruma quest sequences draw together again, and we embark on the era of the big missions. The main quest is beginning to come to a head. Allies for Bruma. Dude, this is totally the Nerevarine Hortator moment. I can feel it. So I just had a thought about Morrowind and Oblivion where I'll use the term funding. So I feel as though in Morrowind, the combat outside of quests along your journey would fund the main quests, where typically you were doing non-violent things. Not always. Sometimes you invade a stronghold, as you do. But there are a lot of quests where you have to get people things, and these things can be gotten in numerous ways. And so they are sort of fetch quests. But I think what was great about the fetch quests in Morrowind was that they were a little bit more common items. It wasn't a singular item in one location. So in that way, the game gave you options for how you were to retrieve them, what books you get for a person, or how you dress a slave woman to make her look Telvanni, how you go about clearing space at a Daedric shrine for an Ashlander tribe. There's a lot of fighting here. It seems as though it's the opposite, where it's at the destination that the developers thought that you wanted action at the destinations, where I just love the gameplay loop of Morrowind, of fighting on your way to get there, you resolving a interpersonal conflict through espionage, intrigue, money, economics, manipulation, and then you return fighting along the path back. With this, I feel like it's totally the opposite. And I don't know if that's how true that is, but that's just a theory that I have. Okay. Allies for Bruma. Your success with the Bruma Gate opens up 2 overlapping quests. Allies for Bruma from Joffrey, and Defense of Bruma from Martin. Make good progress in the first before you try out the second. Joffrey's still worried, and with good reason. The Daedra are numberless. The member of the Bruma Guard are finite. If a great gate opens here like the one that opened and then closed outside Kvatch, then it's over. Something needs to be done to improve the odds. Joffrey asks you to serve as a sort of warrior ambassador to Cyrodiil's other cities and to the Empire's Elder Council, which rules Tamriel in the absence of an emperor, and collect more troops for Bruma's defense. Even using fast travel directly to the castles, this is no small task. If you play the quest out now in its fullest form, it's by far the largest in Oblivion. For one thing, you have to find the right person in places that may, in many cases, be unfamiliar to you. Up to this point, the main quest has kept you out of most Cyrodiil cities. Sometimes you need to see a count, and sometimes a countess. In Skingrad, initially, you may go through a middleman, and at every stop, the ruler wants something big from you in return. As we mentioned earlier in the Oblivion Crisis, lesser Oblivion gates opened outside 6 of Cyrodiil's cities after you completed the Dagon Shrine quest. Understandably, none of their rulers feel comfortable sending their soldiers to another city's defense until their own is safe. Oh no. At Anvil, Breville, Cheydinhal, Coral, Leowen, and Skingrad, to secure a commitment of troops, you have to close a gate. Oh my god. Are you kidding me? All the gates are the same. For the record, in Morrowind, each of the quests reflected the culture of that particular group. This is just, hey, come close the gate. That is such an obvious downgrade. Oh god. In Kvatch, where the Oblivion Gate has already been shut down, the situation's a bit different. Here your old pal Savli and Mattias wants your help in liberating Kvatch's castle. Then again, if you've been aggressively closing those gates and have wrapped up the Wayward Knight and Battle of Castle Kvatch, miscellaneous quests, allies for Bruma will just be a victory tour to collect thanks and troops already earned. Do it now, do it later sort of thing. Which, if you can tell when the Dremora show up in the leveling aspect of Gate to Oblivion, you may want to do the Gates to Oblivion at a lower level, which is disgusting. No, the troops are not sent automatically. You have to go back to each ruler and make your request. Makes sense. Just in the sense that the game has to know that you've triggered that stuff. See the miscellaneous quest chapter for details on securing Kvatch and Cheydinhal contingents. You may not realize initially that the Allies for Bruma quest is entirely optional. You can do all of it, or part of it, or none of it. If you think you can kill anything the game throws at you, or are impatient with the quest's vastness, or just want to see a big battle now, talk to Martin to set things in motion and then follow his instructions. Did we mention that you should probably prepare to be quashed like a bug? It's difficult to survive the conflagration that follows without some seriously tough fellows backing you up, or aggressive and effective participation in the battle by a well-prepared player. Each of the mini quests you complete boosts your chances. This is some Mass Effect 3 type stuff. How many quests is enough to win? There's no simple answer. Joffrey will measure your success if you check in with him occasionally, using the Aid for Bruma topic along the way. You need a majority of the possible allies to win his approval. That's all he's doing, counting allies, and your character's stats, skills, equipment, and your own aggressiveness also weigh in the battle's outcome. What kind of fighter or wizard are you? Is the only good Daedra a dead Daedra? Or do you get anxious and heal up when a scamp bites your big toe? If you have a house full of allies, you should be able to slip through with defensive fighting. If you're coming up short, you may have to spend more of your hit points to make up the difference. Can you safely skip any of these trips? One, certainly. You don't need to go to the Imperial City. Chancellor Okato of the Elder Council is just going to turn you down. The Imperial legions are tied down in the provinces fighting the Daedric invasion, and can't be spared. And it's useful to note that some of those quests have greater practical yields than others. At Breville, you win the services of a proper heroine, a level 15 guard captain named Vera Lyris. At Cheydinhal, you can collect another hero, a level 15 guard captain named Ulrich Leland, and one generic soldier. If Leland has been killed in the miscellaneous quest Corruption and Conscience, you get only the soldier. Anvil and Coral each contribute 2 generic soldiers, and Kvatch, Leowen, and Skingrad provide 1 apiece. We suggest you do the quests in that order and give the battle a trial run after Coral. Here's a rundown on your contacts in each city. their hours of easy availability, and where to find the Oblivion gates. Whoa. Look how, like, looking back, one of the things Oblivion tried to have a lighting system, and, Morrowind didn't have much in the way of lighting compared to Oblivion, but the end result was a bizarre effect on, look at these. These are insane faces. Like, yikes. Skyrim just looks a lot more natural. I'm going to skip this, obviously. I'm not going to, if you want to find out their availabilities, you go for it. 5 of the 6 gates, the gates at Anvil, Breville, Coral, Leywin, and Skingrad are described here. The 6th, the gate outside Jadenhall, is part of a miscellaneous quest and is described in that section. Oh my god. Wait, are you kidding me? All of this is... Oh no. The main quest is so short. Oh my god, are you being for real? So much of this is combat? What the fuck? There's nothing about the story. This is crazy. This is just action. I'm skipping this. I'm not doing this. That is insane. That is a lot of tedious labor, which I know for some that's where the game is, but that's not where my game is. Hashtag not my Bethesda. Not my Elder Scrolls. Dude, we might finish this way sooner than I realized. Maybe that's a good thing. If you're watching this, you're like, hell yeah. Okay, let's fucking do it. All right, so let's assume that you've done as many gates as you want to. How much tedious labor are you willing to put up with? If it was me, I would straight up just cheat. I would open up the console and give however many hit points I would need. And I would say, okay, let's do the big battle. This feels very Lord of the Rings as well. Contacting each defender or each ruler, Gondor calls for aid. Defense of Bruma. Talking to Martin any time after completing both Bruma Gate and Miss Karkand sets events in motion. However, the mission won't reach its climax until you give a final go-ahead. From Martin, you learn that the true objective is to coax the enemy into opening a great gate before Bruma and then entering it to capture a great sigil stone, the final component Martin needs for the portal ritual. Granted, it's dangerous, but it's the only scheme available. And if it works, Martin will have the means to open a gateway into the paradise of Mythic Dawn Chief Mankar Cameron. When your dialogue with Martin is complete, he sets off for Bruma, where he means to lead the defense. Follow him there if you like. Sorry, I used a gerund. That does not exist. Boris and Joffrey do the same. Along the way, Martin can talk to you in greater detail about battle plans, and you'll better understand what's to occur on the plain before Bruma. You've learned from the letter acquired from the Bruma spies that 3 small gates must be opened before a great gate can introduce one of the great siege machines that laid waste to Kvatch. However, your immediate task is to visit Countess Narina Carvain at Castle Bruma and ask her to meet Martin at the Great Chapel of Talos for a council of war. And now to have some fun. Bruma should look a little different than the last time you were here. It is now an armed camp. If you've been a diligent recruiter, you'll find the area immediately outside the castle walls crowded with troops and tents. Okay, so side note, I do love when this happens in a game where a place that you've visited either routinely or once or twice changes into something else. I like that dynamism, and I like that there's a sense of progress of a place into its becoming. It is growing into something new, and I like that the player can see those differences. You can identify the troops by city, chat with them, although the responses are pretty much go team, or listen to them chat amongst themselves. Hey, a lot of movies are like this. It's the Guardians of the Galaxy, Rogue One, you gather a team and then you fight the big bad guy. It's very like tabletop role playing, but I just think it's interesting that like a lot of ensemble movies, the Avengers, it's all about spending that time gathering the team and then you use the team for the big fight at the end. I don't know if every game and every piece of fiction can do that, because eventually that starts to wear out. You want a little bit more robustness from fewer characters, i.e. a drama. I don't know. I think it's pretty worn out at this point. But maybe back then in 2005, not so much. If it's daytime, Carvain is probably in the castle's Great Hall, where she keeps an audience schedule of 8 to 12 and 3 to 8. She recognizes the desperation of the plan. Her guard captain, Bird, calls it madness, but Carvain also seems to recognize things are not quite lost. She agrees to the meeting without qualifications and sets off for the chapel with Bird and her bodyguard. Keep up with them, and you'll be able to watch the church staff retreat from the nave and the exchange between Martin and Carvain in the Ring of Light at the east end of the chapel. When the conversation ends, talk to Carvain again. Her response depends on how many allies you recruited and allies for Bruma. If you completed all the mini-quests, she'll call you a diplomat as well as a warrior. And you'll have two options. I'm not ready yet, and let the battle begin. If you didn't complete all the mini-quests, her response is adjusted to the number you've actually nailed, and you'll have a third option, do more recruiting. This is what we meant about the two quests overlapping. You can continue allies for Bruma here, come back later, and re-embark upon defense for Bruma with more troops on hand. Or if you're unhappy with the character's level or kit, you can use this break to go questing or shopping as well. Just as characters eternally made their rounds at Cloud Ruler Temple, they eternally stand in place in the Great Chapel of Talos. Okay, so this is a point of no return moment. So in a lot of JRPGs, I remember in Final Fantasy X, before you go into the fight with Sin, there is a point of no return. But you can save right before that, and then you can go do all the things that you want to do. You can go do some in-game stuff. So I am getting that sense from this. When you're ready to give Carvain the high sign, the party slowly makes its way out of the church's west door, and suddenly there's a lot going on. Bruma's population is lined up from church to city gate to cheer and salute Martin. He exits onto the plain east of the city, and finally, on Martin's arrival, the whole allied force surges toward a dip northeast of Bruma, where a lesser Oblivion gate has opened. If you skipped allies for Bruma entirely, you'll find the Bruma militia in the dip, a comparatively ragtag and panicky group of home guards. Join the troops. Martin has barely finished his pep talk to the assembled allies when the Daedra start coming through the gate. Tactics limited. Like all the big battles, this one's going to be a bit chaotic. Just keep an eye on Martin. He dashes off into combat with unnerving regularity. And help him if he gets in over his head. Try not to hit your own team. Don't bother trying to close the lesser gates. You can't even enter them here. Martin dies if you move too far away from him. And don't try to fight the whole battle by yourself. This may be tempting if you have a high-level character, but your agenda here is just to keep Martin alive. And when you figure in Joffrey, Boris, Bird, and a pair of Bruma soldiers on top of the allies, you may have as many as 16 defenders to tackle the enemy. That's plenty for the task at hand, and it leaves you free to assume a firefighter's role, rushing to where you're needed most. Let the Daedra come to you rather than trying to stop them right outside the gates, as this will draw forward and engage more and more troops. Step swiftly into the shimmering surface of the great gate soon after it appears. At that moment, invisibly, a clock has started counting down. When you reappear under the red sky of Oblivion, you've begun the next mission, Great Gate. However, before you set out, look around before you leave, and pick your moment of departure carefully. Martin can't die while you're gone, but Joffrey and Boris enjoy no such special protection. Neither is an essential character in the main quest at this point, but both are useful comrades in the final mission, Light the Dragonfires. To ensure their availability at that time, confirm they're disengaged from combat with the Daedra before you move through the Great Gate. Okay, the big fight, and then whatever this is. Gotta say, I'm profoundly disappointed. There was such good promise at the beginning, and then it just deflated. You're at the southern opening of a horseshoe-shaped enclosure. Just to the north, a vast siege crawler moves inexorably south toward the Great Gate. Its forward surface looks like a sun in eclipse. It takes several minutes for the city destroyer to cover the remaining short distance to the exit. It is indestructible and irresistible. If it moves through the gate and onto the plain outside Bruma, the city falls, your mission ends, and the battle is lost. However, if you can claim the Great Sigil Stone from the Citadel to the north before the machine rolls on stage, you've won. Wow, a timed exclusive. But how to get the Sigil Stone in such short a time? Move swiftly along the route we lay out for you. Do not linger over the roads not taken or go searching for loot. Fight only when necessary. This buys you time for a few fights you can't easily avoid. Beyond the open gate, more archers on the bridges to the east and west snipe at you, so don't linger on the open. Step inside the first of the two eastern towers, thus avoiding the Daedra lurking under the underpass beside the western one. Climb to the top and cross the bridge to the north. Depending on which entry tower you chose, you can also head east or west in the north, but the former route involves one less Daedra. As you exit the towers, be mindful of your distance to the siege crawler's maw, since it is capable of showering you with fire blasts. In either of the northern entry area towers, ride the elevator down to the cellar and use the northern exit. You now see the Citadel and two flanking towers to the north. If you chose to pass through the eastern towers, you emerge from this exit, facing a difficult jump over lava on a fallen bridge. If you survive the jump, you must scramble up the terrain through a gauntlet of defensive towers to the bridge in front of the Citadel. Once on the bridge, enter the eastern tower flanking the Citadel. Wow. Okay, maps. Maps, maps, maps. Alright. If you chose to pass through the western towers, a much smaller jump exists here, but multiple Daedra await you on the other side. After you pass the Daedra, scramble up to the bridge in front of the citadel and enter the western tower flanking the citadel. Unlike the leap of faith on the eastern side, if you miss this jump, you'll fall to a broken portion of the bridge that leads you down to a cave called the Smoke and the Scorch. Inside the cave, you find only a few Daedric encounters and some fleshy pods. Progress through the caves to exit to the base level of either the eastern or western towers flanking the citadel. Gotta admit, I find a lot of this guiding through combat really tedious. Activate the gate control at the top of either of these towers. This opens the gate on the bridge leading to the main citadel known as Worldbreaker. Then drop halfway back down the tower and make a run past 3 Dremor for the citadel entrance. No random citadels here, just the one, and a comparatively simple and depopulated one at that. Inside and on the first level, you will find the first of 2 sigil keepers. Each carries a key to the sigil keep. Use the door on the north side at the entry level to reach the vaults of End Times. Inside the vaults of End Times, you will find a hall that contains 3 blades suspended from the ceiling. You can release these blades using the switches found on the walls just before them. Then jump over the blades or wait for them to raise to run under them. After the hall, you will enter a room with a single Daedra and 3 doors. The door to the right contains another Daedra. The door in the middle leads you to a blood fountain and a magicka fountain. And the door to the left will lead you up to the next level of the citadel. You will exit the vaults back out to the center of the citadel to find a long, spiraling hike up the sigil keep and few Daedric encounters. At the top, you'll find another sigil keeper. If you defeat the sigil keeper from the bottom of the citadel, you already have the key you need to enter the sigil keep, but if you chose to pass the first sigil keeper, this is your final chance to obtain the key needed to enter the sigil keeper. Inside, with 2 Daedra in a smaller area, you need to fight again. Then just do what you've done so many times already. Oh my god. Oh god. The annoyance of the guide writer is coming out on that line. And then you're back in the dip northeast of Bruma. The battle is won. The gates crumble. The remaining Daedra die. You can collect a range of congratulatory comments from Joffrey, Martin, and Bird, not to mention some admiring comments from the troops. The allied forces begin to disperse, and Martin begins to plot out the portal ritual. Unbelievable. We are 7 pages away from the end. I have to go to the bathroom. Alright, let's finish this. 4:45. Yep. Plenty of time. Paradise. Now launch an invasion of your own. Back at Cloud Ruler Temple, talk to Martin again. Okay, so there is a gap between the final battle and, like, the final set piece, I guess. With the Great Sigil Stone, he's all set to spin his magic and ask if you're ready for the portal ritual. Once you enter Cameron's Paradise, you won't be able to return through the portal, and you'll have to find another way back. Dante's Inferno and the Paradiso. I wonder if that was intentional. In fact, you're sent back automatically to the fortress when Cameron dies, so make sure you're well equipped and well supplied enough to live off your own resources for a while before you can say yes. This large quest. Okay, so I suppose we might say that this is a point of no return. I mean, last time it was not. It was just like the climactic battle. This large quest, a series of 3 smaller linked quests, isn't quite on a scale with allies for Bruma, but in that mission, you knew at least part of the ground you were covering. Paradise is a wholly unknown area, all strange and unmapped terrain. When you're ready, just tell Martin. He backs off a bit and casts a spell. A fiery portal appears. Enter it. You reappear within a little white stone enclosure in the middle of an Eden-like region. Bangkok Cameron himself gives you your first lesson in Paradise's geography. Big-mouthed supervillain that he is, the unseen Cameron can't help letting the scamp out of the bag. Whatever happened to Dagon? Remember him? And he'll tell you about his Gaia Alada, in a series of monologues. Among other things, you'll hear about a savage garden where my disciples are tempered for a higher destiny, and that he'll await you at Karak Agaialor, my seat at the pinnacle of paradise. His little lesson sets you up with conversation topics that you can use to draw out the ascended immortals in your immediate neighborhood, peaceful mythic dawn cultists who have died in Cameron's service and await return to Tamriel after Dagon's expected victory. The immortals respond to you in one of 3 ways. You're seen as an ensnared enemy, as another annoyance in a land of annoyances, or as a potential savior. Either way, they clarify that you're already in the savage garden. For them, this is a true hell. They are continually killed by the Daedra, reborn and then killed again. The only way out is the Forbidden Grotto, and the grotto door can be unlocked only with the bands of the Chosen. These are given by Cameron to a few favored servants, but these favored ones never return, and no one seems to know what becomes of them. Freeing an axis. Water encloses this pleasant starting zone on 3 sides. The side that isn't enclosed is to the east. In fact, this whole section of Paradise is essentially a funnel pointed east at the door of the flooded grotto which leads to the Forbidden Grotto. When you approach the white stone bridge leading to the door, you run into a Dremora named Cthutet. He makes you a proposition. To enter the Forbidden Grotto, you have to serve him or beat him in a fight. Serving him means freeing a Zivali named Anaxes from where the Ascended Immortals have imprisoned him. Anaxes' location is to the northwest, and what turns out to be his home, the lair of Anaxes, a cave on the western bank of the stream that flows past the grotto entrance. He's lodged behind a boulder at the back of the cave. Beating him in a fight is the more direct and quicker route to Cthutet's band of the Chosen, but comes with the caveat that Cthutet is 5 levels above you, and thus a formidable adversary. If you choose to free Anaxes, do so by activating both logs bracing the boulder and the boulder itself. Stand to the side while doing so, or you may get killed by the rolling boulder. Note that you can also release and then kill the Zivali, a task made easier by the fact that once released, this level 20 monster is focused on killing the 3 guards and pays no attention to you. However, doing so requires you to battle and kill your annoyed quest giver in order to get the bands. Afterward, find Cthutet inside the flooded grotto near the door to the Forbidden Grotto. If you've done the job, he keeps his promise and turns over the bands, but also advises that you're still going to die at the hands of his brother, Orth, and that no one escapes these caves. Orth. It's just called Orth. It's hyphenated, but I don't know why. Put on the bands and open the door. This feels like the quests entering the ghost fence. Like the ghost fence area is an entirely separate area. The Red Mountain is an entirely separated area from Morrowind because of the Ghost Gate, and in those areas is where the finale takes place. I did not realize the amount of parallels between Oblivion and Morrowind. I was so caught up on the conceit of Dagon and Mehrunes Dagon and Dagoth-Ur as 2 wildly different antagonists, I guess, and the contexts of the world, that I didn't consider that in those smaller moments, all the little details ended up linking together in similar ways, but just done way more terribly. Forbidden Grotto. The Forbidden Grotto turns out to be a prison. The favored few are caged or dead or both. You can't help them, but you can torture them by pushing levers that lower them into the lava below. What? Indeed, unless you find help here, you won't even be able to help yourself. The 3-section cave is a real challenge. It offers baddies of various stripes, many of them Daedra, ranging from scamps at low levels to Atronox, Clanfear, Daedroth, and Spider Daedra at higher ones. However, most of them are spread out through the tunnels and, with little art, can be ambushed and killed off separately. But there is one place where you may run into trouble, and another that will stop you cold. First is a large room in the first section of the grotto occupied by 3 Dremora, Ranyu, Amchaos, and Cthutet's brother Orth. Unlike Cthutet, these Dremora have not read your press clippings. If you go waltzing into this room, there's every chance you'll end up dead. You can avoid them by enlisting Eldamil as a confederate. In fact, you'll have to work with him. Eldamil is your only way out of the Forbidden Grotto. If you choose to kill Eldamil anyway, he'll reappear later on in the cave. Lots of skipping due to maps and pictures. See, like, what's the point of this map? 1, 2, 3. Like, what is to be gained from this? You know exactly. Like, it looks like an intestine. Like, it just here's where it goes. here's where the food comes in, and here's where the food comes out. This one makes slightly more sense due to its non-linearity, but like, it's not that non-linear. Like, both of these paths end up, yikes. Compare this to like the old school CRPGs of mazes and maps that you had to draw yourself. This former advisor to Mankar Cameron is near the entrance to the first section's second large room, garbed in mythic dawn attire. When you find him, he tells you that he helped plan Uriel Septim's murder and opened the Great Gate before Kvatch, but now he's had a change of heart and wants to help you. Eldamil's appearance may be a little too timely, his confession a little too earnest, his involvement in the Mythic Dawn's plot a little too broad, but he's legit. He proves it to you by getting you past Orth in a way that you would not survive if he were a Cameron loyalist. What? Is this the Dungeon Master's stand-in character? Like, even the writer of the guide is fighting against that in this paragraph here. Once Orth is gone, Eldamil opens the gate leading to the east side of the chasm. Don't vault the trench. Even if you're a gifted jumper, you only have to vault right back again when you hit a dead end at the end of the grotto's second section. Eldamil can't follow you across the trench, but he meets up with you at a stone circle early in the grotto's next section and removes your bands of the Chosen. To get across the trench, Eldamil puts you in a cage that drops a ramp across the trench, and also opens a stone door on the far side. If you try to jump across the trench without using Eldamil's help, the way will be blocked. A good thing too, the same bands that got you into the Forbidden Grotto prevent you from getting out. Attempts to move from the grotto's second section to the third with bans in place are greeted by an explosion of light, and no teleporting to the next section action whatsoever. After Eldemil removes the bans, he asks if he can help. Say yes now or get killed several times and come back and say it later. If you agree, he follows you into the third section of the grotto where he helps you kill a Zivali by the name of Madrik, cousin to Anaxes, and then out the final door to the Terrace of Dawn. Was there like cut content in this game? Like, am I supposed to know who these characters are or care? Like, I get that in Morrowind there are a lot of Sixth Dawn cultists, but like, I don't know. I guess characterization before conflict wasn't necessarily Morrowind's strong suit either. You know, there's Nabani Mesa and Caius Casades and Mira Milo. There are some main characters in the main quest, but really the world is the main character, and you're kind of learning about that main character in it. So could we say that that's what's happening here? Not so much, because you're just deleting things. Karak Agaya lore. I don't think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but you're on the top of the mountain. It's very similar to the section of Paradise where you first arrived. You can explore, but there's really not much to see apart from Cameron's villa and grounds. Just follow the violet mana blooms up the slope to the north to find a statue of an axe-wielding Mehrunes Dagon. You also discover a path leading east through 3 arches to a temple-like structure. When you enter the grounds, you'll find Cameron's children, Raven and Bruma. They're supposed to be dead. Raven was Gwyneth's sponsor in the mythic Dawn in the Path of Dawn, and Bruma attended your initiation ritual at the Dagon Shrine. You had to kill Raven, and between saving the sacrificial victim and grabbing the Mysterium Xerxes, you may have killed Bruma too. But in Paradise, everyone who has died in the service of Mankar Cameron lives again. Anyone who dies in Paradise eventually respawns, except Cameron himself. You can talk to Raven and Bruma, but their responses run to taunts rather than conversation. Your business is with their father. He's seated on his throne inside his palace, waiting your arrival. When you approach, Cameron begins another speech, a forecast of a future under Mehrunes Dagon. You can let him say his piece, or you can attack him. We recommend attacking him immediately. And don't waste your time fighting Bruma and Raven. Like everyone else in this paradise, they are effectively unkillable. Killing them can buy you a temporary breathing space. They will soon respawn out of a glowing cloud on one of the resurrection paths inside the palace. This is also where they will respawn if you kill them outside the palace. Concentrate your fire on Mankar. This might be the time to put away that magic sword for a change and just use your unenchanted weapons. He has a permanent spell absorption, spell reflection, and damage reflection that make him particularly dangerous to attack with magic or with enchanted weapons. Bruma and Raven will of course do their best to distract you from killing their father. Eldemil can be some help, at least in the initial phase of the battle. When it's over, you end up with the Amulet of Kings in your inventory, whether you actually take it yourself or not. And back at Cloud Ruler Temple, give the amulet to Martin. Once he has it on, it doesn't slip off. He is Septim's son. If you ever doubted it, he's almost the Emperor. All that remains is to restore the dragon fires in the Temple of the One, and with them, the waning barriers between Oblivion and Tamriel. Martin's already been in touch with Imperial Chancellor Akato about a meeting. He's behaving like a good politician already, and urges that the two of you set off right away before the enemy can recover from this setback. Okay. Well, I don't know. It's difficult really to say. There isn't really an equivalent to Mankar and Cameron in a Morrowind. I can't very well say that more time should have been spent developing Mankar Cameron as a character when Morrowind wasn't really predicated on that. You fought Sixth House cult leaders, but none of them ever presented themselves upon multiple occasions as a kind of leitmotif or as an antagonist in such a way that visiting them again would have any sort of emotional payoff. So equally, this does feel disappointing, this paradise place. I don't really know what you're gathering from all of these enemies that you fight. It doesn't feel like, I guess some of this stuff was foreshadowed with Martin's investigations. Maybe it's actually great. I don't know. I do like that it sends you to a place that feels very different. You know, there's a lot of resonance that comes from going to a strange place, and Bethesda often does it. They will take you to a third place outside of the typical bounds of the world that you've been in, so as to hammer home the importance of that moment in the world. Still, it doesn't feel right. I wonder if I can figure out how to talk about that as we get to the finale. The final quest, and there's only a couple pages left. Yeah, we'll see. Light the dragon fires. One last trip. With Martin in tow, fast travel from Cloud Ruler Temple to Imperial City's Central Palace District. If Joffrey's still among the living after the battle for Bruma, he comes along as well. Outside the palace, you meet up with Boris. If Boris fell in battle in the sewers or outside Bruma, he'll be replaced by Captain Stefan. If Stefan somehow wound up dead too, well, you get jack squat. While Boris stands watch outside, enter the Elder Council chambers and speak to Chancellor Akato. He announces that the council's already had a sit down on this matter, has recognized Martin's claim to the throne, and Akato is interrupted. A messenger brings word of an attack. Oblivion gates have opened across Imperial City. Daedra are inside the walls. At that moment, all hell breaks loose. 2 Dremora have killed the guards outside the council entrance and entered the corridor outside the chamber. The mission has suddenly changed from a coronation procession to a scramble for survival. You and a small army must fight your way to the Temple of the One and its dragon fires. Almost immediately, the fight in the corridor flows outside. The Dremora were just an avarice unit. Up from the south and east comes the main body, including more Dremora and a group of Daedra down at random from a list that includes everything from scamps to Zivali. This battle is the usual close-quarters chaos, but you should prevail. Even if you lost Joffrey and Boris at Bruma, you have a lot more guys on your side now. Akato, who is the Imperial Battle Mage, the 2 guards who were stationed at the interior door to the council chambers, and who stick with the party as long as Martin lives, and 5 Imperial Legionnaires who appear out of the north and join the fray. Their fates are not predetermined. They live or die according to the tides of combat, and the more that survive, the easier the rest of your trip will be. If their captain is among the survivors, he'll have a brief exchange with Martin. The Legion compound has been cut off, and the small unit was the last to escape, meaning this is all the reinforcements you'll get. Happily, this is also all the Daedra you face in the Palace District. You've jumped the quest's first major hurdle, and your reward is a sense of the Imperial City's dire predicament. From your position outside the council chambers, note the flames above the walls in adjoining districts. The capital is burning. Your path leads only to the Dragonfires. The only operable doors in the Palace District are the ones leading to the Temple District in the southwest corner, and the one back into the council chambers. The only operable door in the Temple District is into the Temple of the One. After you pass through the doors from the Palace District, it is barred behind you by the guards. You can't make a detour through the other parts of the city in the hope of saving it piece by piece, or finding a safer passage. You can't spirit Martin to safety, as the Blades did his father, though it is an elegant thought. And needless to say, you can't use fast travel across this hostile environment. You're now operating with special versions of the Palace and Temple District. They exist only during this quest. When it's over, you can no longer reach them. Loot the corpses that you want to loot now, and don't drop anything of consequence, either outdoors or in the temple, otherwise they're gone for good. If you've overburdened yourself afterward, dump the extra in the council chambers. This room doesn't change its state once the main quest is complete, so you'll be able to recover your goods later. Head southwest into the Temple District, or just follow your companions, who may already be headed that way en masse. Here, the Daedra have opened a pair of gates, one east and the other northwest of the Temple of the One. When you approach them, they start pumping out lots of Daedra. Don't bother with the gates. As with the standard Oblivion gates at the Bruma battlefield, you can't even enter them. Only deal with the Daedra when necessary to your survival. The more you kill, the more Daedra the gates pump out. They're set up to maintain a more or less constant number of enemies in the district. Advance swiftly to an enemy you can beat, but oddly enough can't kill. He's not far away. Closing in on the gates gives you your first look at the main quest's final boss monster, the vast, red, axe-wielding form of Mehrunes Dagon blocks the entrance to the Temple of the One. Jesus Christ. The journal entry reporting this discovery is rather panic-stricken, and with good reason. Dagon's appearance here changes the whole equation. It makes lighting the Dragonfires irrelevant. Forget containing Oblivion. Oblivion has already arrived. Talk to Martin. This may be a little tricky with all the chaos going on around you, but it's the most important conversation you have with him. He tells you that mortal weapons may hurt Dagon, but that he can't be killed. You then raise the possibility of casting him back into Oblivion and using the Amulet of Kings. And this gives Martin an idea. He doesn't say what the idea is, only that I now know what I was born to do. Perhaps Martin, like his father, has had a prophetic dream. For this recalls another moment, not so long ago, when Uriel Septim looked into your face in the dim light of an Imperial prison cell and realized his dream was real and that he would die that day. Martin just asks you to trust him and get him to the temple's dragonfires. How? Martin has already given you a hint. You can't kill Dagon, but you can hurt him. If he can be staggered by heavy damage from a single blow of a weapon or spell, you and Martin can race past the reeling giant into the temple. Once in the temple, Martin's finally safe. It's no longer your fight. All that's required is to talk to him one last time to set him in motion and begin the end sequence. He says he's sorry you won't be around to help rebuild Tamriel. He thanks you for your friendship and he says goodbye. But now I must go, he says. The dragon waits. Martin moves within the circle of the dead dragonfires. Just as he reaches them, Dagon breaks through the temple's roof. You won't actually see Martin smash the Amulet of Kings. This reference appears only in your journal. But the dragonfires are relit in a great gout of flame. Martin disappears from view behind the fires and emerges transformed into a vast dragon. The dragon and the Daedra Lord struggle, and then Dagon is gone, cast back into Oblivion. The city has been saved. The Oblivion crisis is ended, but at the cost of another emperor, for Martin too is gone. Wow. So in this metaphor, or in this parallel, Mankar Cameron is actually Dagoth-Ur, and Mehrunes Dagon is a Kulakan, if a Kulakan had actually been mobilized in Morrowind, because this is the big bad that was going to be used to take down the known civilization. It's another big fight. There's a lot of big fights here in the end. And that was true of, to be sure, of Morrowind. I feel like, you got to talk to Vivek, you got to acquire Keening and Sunder. And in that way, Keening and Sunder sort of act as the Amulet of Kings here. It's still a totem that is the thing that has to be gotten. The MacGuffin that allows the ending to take place. So I don't know. I get the sense that this feels worse because of how brief. So I feel like you can do this campaign. You can do the main quest very quickly. So what we're going to do is we're going to look up how long to beat Oblivion and how long to beat. And the main story apparently is 32 hours. 44 hours. Okay, a little bit more comparable than I realized. But still, main plus sides, completionist. So there is an overall reduction in the amount of content, and I think there is a reduction in the quality of that content. I think let's get to the epilogue, and then I'll offer some evaluative thoughts about the Oblivion campaign. But I'm assuming if you've been listening, and you probably already know, but I'll repeat it just for posterity. Epilogue. Is he with his great ancestor Tiber Septim, as the journal entry speculates, or simply dead? Did he pass into Oblivion with Dagon? Is he a Dagon still? You can hear a bit more about Martin in dialogue after this event, from his own lips in a video sequence. For all the fires, it turns out the Imperial City fared pretty well in the battle. When you leave the temple, the 2 gates have been closed. The Daedra are gone. The fires are out. You can move freely again to the Palace District and other parts of the city, and you'll discover over time that the Daedric invasion hasn't cut you off from anything that was present in the Imperial City beforehand. Quests, shops, and characters are as they were before. What a crazy. Living in Cyrodiil, am I right? Indeed, the only lingering damage is to the Temple of the One. Its dome is gone, its walls are in bad shape, and at the center of the temple, where the dragon fires burned for centuries, now stands a great stone statue of a dragon. Is it purely representational, a symbol of Martin's heroic sacrifice? A sentinel vigilant against future Daedric invasions? Or is the point not so much the statue as what it has replaced, a tacit indication that Tamriel no longer needs dragonfires, divine amulets, or even emperors to protect it against Oblivion? You won't get a clear answer within the game. No one seems to know the meaning of or the source of the statue. When a big statue suddenly shows up without the obvious benefit of an earthly agency, stands to reason that the gods were somehow involved. The victory over the Daedra seems total. When you venture back out into Cyrodiil, you find that all the random Oblivion gates in the wilderness and any Oblivion gates left open after allies for Bruma have been closed. In fact, the only existing Daedra are the ones occupying Castle Kvatch. If you haven't completed the miscellaneous quest, The Battle for Castle Kvatch, you can still do so now. That's incredible. If they survived, the other named characters from the final expedition, Joffrey, Boris, or Captain Stefan, and Chancellor Akado, returned to their respective hangouts, the Blades at Cloud Ruler Temple, and Akado in the Elder Council chambers. What will become of them? Much of this lies outside the scope of Oblivion, but the Elder Council will run the Empire, at least in the short term, and presumably that means Akado, as the Council's chief, will become an even more significant political force. Akado seems like a straight arrow, but given the Empire's unhappy history with ambitious Imperial battle mages, This possibility may give you pause. Presumably the blades, their official functions rendered superfluous by the absence of an emperor, will now revert to their origins as a monastic order. However, none of these men have roles in the rest of Oblivion, though Okado's name does pop up as a victim in a Thieves Guild quest. Of course, other quests will bring you back to the area around Cloud Ruler Temple. You'll always be welcome. You can still chat with old friends, sleep in the barracks or in Martin's old bedroom, weird, read the books in the library, and generally use the place as a base of operations. But the main quest, having run its course, the old friends won't have much to say. You may detect in the fortress that same sense of inevitability we picked up back in the sanctum at the beginning of our story. The place seems rather cold and dark. Things have changed. They'll never be the same again. I don't believe that. Wow. Okay. That's the main quest. Gotten through a lot faster than I realized I thought this was going to take just as long. So one obvious point to make about the Oblivion main quest through the guide is that it's much shorter. It's much shorter to read. It may not be as short to play, considering the amount of combat that you're forced to get through. My first gut reaction is that I don't like it. The biggest change from Morrowind to Oblivion was those middle parallel quests of Allies for Bruma, where instead of, like the Nerevarine and Hortador, where you're attempting to approach certain cultures and do things for them as their culture would like, based on their desires, the Allies for Bruma quest has you resolve this situation or get their support in the same way each and every time. And I think that is just a shameful, egregious use of the player's attention. I think if the player wants to do those Oblivion quests on their own as side content before the end of the main quest, because I would assume narratively, except for the Kvatch quest, that once you fight and defeat Mehrunes Dagon, all the Oblivion gates would go away. And so it would be an incentive for a completionist to go to each and every bespoke Oblivion gate on their own time, to grab whatever loot that they want to. And if there are certain secrets or lore or anything like that, which I doubt they are, they seem totally just like combat only dungeons. But in any case, they get that and they leave. And then the final quest for Oblivion, it wraps it up in a nice neat bow, and all the Oblivion gates go away. And I think there should have been individuated quests for each of these cities, because it would have been a great introduction to the rest of the world. I think that this main quest, Allies for Bruma, runs directly in the face of what I thought that the main quest was designed to show off. It did so with the Daedric quest earlier in the game. It presented a set of Daedric items that you could get from Martin, under the impression that there are other Daedric quests that the player can go to, can complete those, and earn items. So it's a hint that there's more to the game, that there's this iceberg effect. And the main quest does a great job. Well, not a great job, because you have to give up one of those items. And like we talked about before, I think it's padding of a sort. So it's a decent quest. And then there could have been a great opportunity, Allies for Bruma. It didn't have to be the towns necessarily. Like, you could instead get in touch with the Fighters Guild, get in touch with the Mages Guild, get in touch with the Thieves Guild, even get in touch with the Dark Brotherhood awkwardly, like, hey, can you spare an assassin? I don't know, like, Dark Brotherhood would probably laugh and say no, but it at least gets the player into the idea that the Dark Brotherhood exists at all. And touching base with all of those would be a great way for the main quest to say, especially in this like penultimate act before the final act, to say, hey, all of these places exist, you can go to them and complete quests for them, and maybe those increases in reputation can help you for the final outcome. Now, because of that, my original theory with Morrowind is that the best way to play the main quest is to play the first part of the main quest at the beginning, to play the middle part of the main quest at the middle of one's playthrough at hour 50 instead of our middle 50 of 100, so to speak, and then to fight and defeat Dagoth as the last thing that you do in the playthrough. With this one, I don't know. I think I'm under the impression that for the main quest, you can do it whenever. doesn't matter if you do it at the very beginning of your playthrough. It doesn't matter if you do it at the very end of your playthrough. It is all there and it's all available. And I don't know, like, there, with the defeat of Dagoth in Morrowind, the Blight goes away, which is it's a visual reminder to your playthrough that you've defeated that. And your story is largely over, and the story of the Blight in that time period is largely over as well. So there isn't a lot of resonance, although I suppose you could argue that politically the implications of that would be quite large. What does the temple do now that it does not have to fight Dagoth? It can now concentrate its efforts elsewhere. What does that mean for the Imperial Legion? The Imperial Legion as an occupation force. What does that mean for the quarantine of Vardenfell as an island, and Morrowind at large as a province? So I suppose there are questions to be answered. To me, here the questions are way more immediate. Martin was supposed to be in line for the throne, and Martin, very much like Lord of the Rings, takes the Amulet of Kings and sacrifices himself, right? Frodo eventually has to leave. The world that is there is in a new era, but it's not for him. It's for the descendants. And Martin does the same thing. He uses the Amulet of Kings. He turns. There's a big kaiju fight, and then there's a statue that appears, which I suppose is the visual representation, like the disappearance of the Blight. But then immediately there's a political vacuum. There are certain questions that have to be answered. It seems here that the guide answers these questions for me. I'm not sure if the game explicitly says this thing, like the Elder Council is going to take care of Cyrodiil until a leader can be, garnered, acquired. And there's some resonance in terms of the blades, but like the rest of the game sort of just does not respond to that. And I suppose that fits my thesis from before about the time bubble, where you're making a difference in a small but yet large way. The world can't respond all too much to that because it is still carrying out its own thing. So to me, one of the lessons of the main quest is that it's caught between two. It's a rock and a hard place. It's a double bind. You want a situation big enough that the stakes feel important for the character that you're playing as. However, when the stakes are that big, then you also, therefore, expect the world to be reactive in just as big of a way. And that is sort of impossible with the conceit of the world that you're entering in. It has to be this static period of unrest so that a lot of the other actions that other factions take makes sense. So in Starfield, I predict the exact same thing. In Starfield, I predict that the constellation that you're joining is going to be this group that finds artifacts, and these artifacts have huge implications. But once you learn the truths of that scientific discovery, it has large implications for the world that you won't see, but that are implied. And I don't think that's a stretch to predict that based on the two guides that we've looked at here. I just think Oblivion is worse in its quest design for the main quest. Now, I don't know what those are like for the factions. There are less factions in general. There's less to do in Oblivion. And I am very shocked that in the Allies for Bruma, you do eventually go to each town, but those are optional, I suppose. Much of the world you go to early on in the main quest, and you're covering a lot of ground in the first half of the game. The second half of the game is not as much travel as you might think. You spend a lot of time in Cloud Ruler Temple. You spend a lot of time in the Imperial City. There is a quest where you go to Sancretor. That's a big dungeon. But, that's it? And in that way, Oblivion seems like very much a stopgap between two games. So Morrowind and, Fallout 3 or Skyrim as the next upcoming games. What else do I want to say? I think the main quest failed, not just in introducing the player to the world, but also introducing the player geographically. There's so much of this to explore, but the Vardenfell Morrowind main quest pretty much took you purposefully to every corner of that island. And I think that doing so really helps the player to become aware of just how vast and intricate and dense Vardenfell is. And in some cases, it hurts. It's difficult for the player to find some of those Ashlander tribes. It's difficult to uncover who exactly is the person to speak to for the three houses. It's difficult to deal with Telvanni structures, but it helps to teach you some things about Vardenfell. It is a decentralized system of many competing parties who have their own interests and desires. And I think that is really great. And it feels really coherent. And I really like that about Morrowind. Now, to be sure, Oblivion, which takes place in Cyrodiil, is likely a lot more centralized patrician location, as it should be. So you would think that more of what you would be doing in Oblivion would be similarly, maybe non-violent, but a lot more verbal, a lot more based on intrigue. I would have loved if Oblivion had come on several discs in order to compensate for the voice acting, for the amount of information on those discs. I would not have minded it. There have been times in previous console generations, in previous games, where games came out on multiple discs. And it's maddening to think that of all the studios that did not lean into the multiple disc idea in the Xbox 360 era, Bethesda didn't do it. LA Noire did it for their facial technology. Mass Effect did it for, I think, Mass Effect 3. Did they also do it for Mass Effect 2? I don't remember. Lost Odyssey, a not very well-known JRPG, did it. Multiple discs, and those games were not nearly as expansive, at least so they claimed, as this open-world RPG. Now, of course, an obvious question is, how would you do it? How would you create a 2-disc system? If it was me, I would have done a west or east, and west and east, or north and south delineation, where they would have some line and they would just say the northern half or the southern half, and it would be separated, maybe not this way, but separated by like a mountain range or separated by a big river. And in order to get to that other side, you would take a boat, and that boat would basically be the insert disc 2, insert disc 1. And the bottom half would contain all the quests for the bottom half, and the northern half would contain all the quests for the upper half. There would be occasions in the main quest where you would have to travel across the way. I think that would be annoying to have to switch discs, but you've got to do it eventually, right? So that is not a very popular suggestion, but I just don't see the density. I don't see the cohesiveness. Like they made so many sacrifices. The repetition is a big one. The repetition of the Oblivion gates, the repetition of the designs of some of these shrines and forts, the repetition in the dialogue perhaps, and the voice acting, and how, I don't know, I think I'm repeating over and over again what I'm saying, but it feels like Oblivion feels like Morrowind with simultaneously one hand behind your back, and you also have a knife in the other hand, where the knife can only do certain things. And I know I'm using an extended metaphor, but there's a lot more power. There's a lot more technology in the 360 pushing. But what they chose to push were all the things that I think made the main quest suffer. Now, I wonder if that's the case with the other aspects of this game. And that is something that I would recommend watching Patrician TV's video on. I gather that he feels the same way, just because Morrowind did some things worse, clearly, but the gains from its choices were much larger than the gains from the choices of Oblivion. I think that Bethesda chose wrong. I think it was not ready. I think the technology was not ready. I think the ideas are eerily similar to Morrowind, and because they reached farther with their technology, they weren't able to achieve what they wanted even though they reached farther, and so they instead landed somewhere underneath Morrowind. I know that there are probably some people who prefer Oblivion to Morrowind for these changes, so I'm not going to sit here and say that this is an objective claim. It's purely subjective. I could see another player reaching really different conclusions based on this, but from my perspective, and looking at the main quests and comparing them, to me it is just so obvious how much more effective Morrowind is at revealing to the prospective player of more of Morrowind or more of Oblivion what there is to offer. Not only that, I just think that the story being told in Morrowind is told a little better than it is in Oblivion. In Oblivion, you take the role of a guide, a Virgil to Martin, as he makes his own knowledgeable quest sort of into hell and out again, and then with that knowledge makes the kind of heroic sacrifice that you as a player could make, but you don't because you're not Uriel Septim's son. So you effectively are not the chosen one, but you help the chosen one to achieve his destiny. How do I feel about that? I'm not opposed to the idea. I actually think that conceit could have worked really well, just because I think Morrowind is probably the best chosen one story that I've ever seen. And from what I've known of prophecies and chosen one stories and lineages and things like that, it's easy to fail or it's easy to get wrong. So in this case, it's easy for me to see how you like Nick Carraway, I suppose, in The Great Gatsby, you bear witness to this story. And that's good for a role-playing game because you can bear witness to the story, and then if you want to, you can move on, or you can run away from the story and feel no worse for wear because there is not some prophecy lingering on in the back of your head that you yourself have to complete. You can assume that any other person can find Martin and close Oblivion once and for all and defeat Mehrunes Dagon, all of that shit. So I'm not opposed to that idea. I think that Morrowind intersected with other factions way better than Oblivion because they did it in general. I don't think there's really a single moment where in the main quest that's not true. You consult with Tarmina, who is a part of the Mages Guild. So I have to confess, there is a moment when you get to hear from someone in the Mages Guild. It does happen. And that was actually my favorite quest. It was the information gathering that I love so much about these quests, to find out what is the world like, who are we dealing with, what are the barriers, who are some of the major players, and what does the antagonist have against this world. And to be honest, I never really got a sense from the guide about what Mehrunes Dagon wanted and what Mankar Cameron wanted. Now, to be sure, in Morrowind, we looked at the notes specifically that the main quest gave us to give to Caius, but that we could look at throughout. There were books that we were told about in the Oblivion main quest, but we were never given notes to give to Martin. We were given objects or coded books to give to Martin. And I suppose if we wanted to, we could look at those on the Imperial Library. We could look at the Mythic Dawn books. We could look at the Xerxes, whatever book that we had to steal. I think that was a coded book, though. I think that's just in symbols, if I recall correctly. I could be wrong. I don't know. I didn't get the feeling of what he wanted, what they wanted, except just total destruction and fun times for the player to have to fight against. A lot of fighting. A lot more fighting than I think I would have liked. Maybe back then, when I was younger, I would have appreciated that fighting because it helps to raise your character's combat and things like that. But I don't really care for combat as much unless it's embedded into a world of other things. I know conflict resolution is pretty much required to do with combat most of the time in role-playing games, just because it does a lot of things for the world that aren't strictly combat related. It helps to provide a context for the wildness of the place. So I do understand why combat is so heavily enforced, but I don't know. What else do I want to say about this? I worry that there's going to be a diminishing returns as I look at the next guides. I do want to look at the Fallout 3 guide. I was thinking about skipping them, but I think Starfield is so adjacent to Fallout in its gameplay that I think I should do what I can to look at the way that those main quests are structured around that gameplay loop. And that is going to be interesting because I have played Fallout 3 a lot. I've played Skyrim quite a bit. I have not played Fallout 4 at all. And I have the guide. And I have seen a lot of review footage on Fallout 4. I'm not looking forward to discussing or even looking through that main quest. So we'll just have to see how that ends up. But overall, I'm shocked. I'm shocked that Oblivion so disappointed me so quickly. There's a lot of momentum and energy in the same way as Morrowind going into the middle of the quest and the main quest line, and then it just really deflates into action set piece over and over again. It needed a conversation with Vivek moment. It needed a broadening of the implications, not just for your character, but also for the world. You learn about Dagothr. You learn about where Vardenfell stands. That needed to happen with Cyrodiil. Cyrodiil seems like such a static, pristine art piece rather than a lived-in territory. I think that's a problem, and we'll see if that problem is fixed. Skyrim is such an incredible place that it will be fixed there. I'm fairly certain. But will it be fixed in that way for Fallout 3? Does the world benefit from the main quests of Fallout 3 and Skyrim? We will have to find out. If you made it this far, thank you. It was definitely shorter than I imagined it, but here we are. So, okay, goodbye.